Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Friendship System. Deadpool is my best friend. Chapter 41. The two of them were so busy that they had to face each other. Chen Yi followed Peter Parker all the way and met his good friend Harry and Norman Osborn, who had not yet become the Green Goblin. Chen Yi felt that this version of Harry was very miserable. His girlfriend was robbed, his father was killed, and he was also disfigured by the explosion. I don't know why a rich second generation like Harry would like to be friends with a poor loser like Peter Parker. This is probably just a movie. It would never happen in reality. Unconsciously, Chen Yi also followed Peter into the exhibition hall. There are a total of 32,000 known spider species in the world. A scientist was explaining to the group of young people, and Peter and others listened with relish. Wow, this is so cool. Peter couldn't help but sigh. Peter was taking photos while listening to the scientist's explanation. Chen Yi leaned against a corner and quietly waited for the plot to happen. Harry on the side urged Peter, "Do you want to talk to Mary now?" Peter shyly shook his head and refused. No, go talk to her." Obviously Peter did not have the courage to talk to Mary in front of him. Seeing this, Harry could only go forward and talk to Mary himself. "It's really disgusting." Mary looked at these little spiders with excitement, but it was obvious that she didn't hate the spiders in front of her. "Yes, it's really disgusting." Harry went forward and echoed. Seeing the two people chatting hotly, Peter looked at them from behind and felt very uncomfortable. And Harry was now popularizing the knowledge about spiders to Mary, which was what Peter had just popularized to Harry. Peter could only lick his wounds silently behind him. If he was braver, would he be the one popularizing Mary now? Just when they were chatting heatedly, only Chen Yi noticed that there was one spider missing from the cage that was supposed to contain 15 spiders, and the spider was now in the corner of the ceiling. Just at this moment, Harry was pulled aside by the teacher, leaving Peter and Mary alone. Peter was still hesitant at this moment, and Chen Yi couldn't stand it anymore, so he walked up to them and said, "How about I take a photo of the two of you? Then Peter will take a photo of you separately." Chen Yi blinked at Peter. "Is that okay?" Peter looked at Chen Yi with a grateful expression, and then looked at Mary with expectation. This opportunity was very rare for him. Peter didn't expect to see this classmate Chen Yi again, and he didn't expect Chen Yi to help him speak up. Peter dreamed of taking a photo with Mary. This made Peter like Chen Yi even better. Mary looked at Peter hesitantly, then looked at Chen Yi holding the camera, and finally nodded. Although it was strange that Chen Yi suddenly came in and asked her and Peter to take a photo, Mary also thought that there was nothing wrong with taking a photo together. Then, under Chen Yi's urging, Chen Yi quickly pressed the shutter and left a photo of the two of them. Peter had a happy photo with Mary. "Seize the opportunity yourself," Chen Yi reminded Peter, returned the camera and left. Then Chen Yi received a system reminder. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Peter Parker Toby version was successfully added as a friend. Congratulations to the host. Get the item, the bully glasses. Congratulations to the host. Get 10 points of friendship. Looking at the bully glasses in his hand, Chen Yi was speechless. The introduction of this glasses is really pitfall. Bullshit glasses. Wearing this glasses will increase the hostility of people around you by 100%, a must-have prop for playing the pig and eating the tiger. Sure enough, Peter was a waste before he became Spider-Man. Peter took the opportunity to ask Mary for a few more photos, and Chen Yi, who had quietly left, returned and quietly waited for Peter to be bitten by a spider. Just as Peter was happily taking photos of Mary, a spider suddenly descended from the sky and was about to bite Peter. Mary's boyfriend was furious when he saw that Peter, a coward, was actually talking and laughing while taking photos of Mary. He knocked Peter down with a punch, and the spider that was supposed to land on Peter landed on Mary's boyfriend instead. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream instantly filled the entire exhibition hall. Everyone heard it and came forward to check. It was obvious that the spider was going to be on Mary's boyfriend. Mary's boyfriend instantly convulsed and foamed at the mouth on the ground. Mary, who was standing next to him, was terrified. I was speechless. Peter looked at the scene in front of him with a puzzled look. Chen Yi drank coffee and watched the scene calmly. The spider that was supposed to bite Peter actually bit a minor character. It was obvious that this minor character did not have the life of the protagonist. He could not resist the spider's poison and fell to the ground dying. Chen Yi was looking forward to what would happen next, but he also had to keep a close eye on the spider. If necessary, he could let it bite Peter again to get the plot back on track, otherwise Chen Yi didn't know when he could complete the task and return to his own universe. However, after the spider bit, it seemed to know that it had done something wrong and quickly fled the scene. He quickly looked around to find the figure of the spider, but there were more and more people around him, and the scene became chaotic. Chen Yi could only close his eyes and use his observation hockey to find the whereabouts of the spider. At this time, the security guards outside the venue also began to evacuate the crowd and seal the cages of the spiders. It was obvious that they were afraid that the same accident would happen again. Harry and his teacher heard the screams and rushed back to the exhibition hall, seeing such a tragic scene. Harry quickly ignored Peter lying on the ground, and hurried forward to hug Mary, trying to comfort the frightened Mary with his chest. Peter watched this scene, and the anger in his heart continued to heat up. His clenched fists trembled slightly, and the anger in his eyes seemed to burn everything around him. At this time, Chen Yi finally found the spider in a corner, and it was about to bite an innocent passerby. Chen Yi calmly used chaos magic to freeze the spider to prevent it from causing harm again. Chen Yi has not yet decided whether to control the spider to bite again, or to take the spider away without caring about the universe. Take the spider back to study it, maybe you can mass-produce Spider-Man. But looking at the man who was bitten by the spider and was about to die, Chen Yi gave up the idea again. Bad world. Chen Yi couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the chaotic scene of Peter lying on the ground and Harry hugging Mary, the green tea. At this moment, Chen Yi couldn't help but have an idea in his mind: why not let the spider bite Mary? Then Chen Yi removed the chaos magic on the spider, but the spider didn't bite Mary, but bit Peter directly as if it received an inexplicable command. Chen Yi looked at this scene and could only sigh slightly. It seems that some things are destined. So, that means the mission should be completed, I can go back. After Chen Yi said this, he wanted to activate the ring to go back, but there was no response after waiting for a long time. Chen Yi frowned. Could it be that the crisis has not been resolved? Suddenly Dr. Octopus come to the scene. Without waiting, Chen Yi beat him so hard that he can't get up. Meanwhile, Peter is looking at Chen Yi and remembers something in heart. Kamen Rider. Peter finally heard the name of the blue and white mask on TV. His heart seemed to be touched, and his eyes were full of excitement, as if he wanted to convey this excitement to the knight on the other side of the TV, so that he could feel his admiration. He wanted to find the knight for an autograph, but his body, which had just been bitten by a spider, did not allow him to do so. The onlookers also shouted, with admiration flashing in their eyes, as if Kamen Rider was their god. Kamen Rider, you are my god. Kamen Rider, my superhero. There were even some open ladies, with admiration and love flashing in their eyes, who began to throw clothes at Chen Yi, wanting Chen Yi to sign on the clothes. Their actions made Chen Yi laugh and cry. He looked at the clothes flying towards him and felt helpless. If they didn't dare to approach the scene, they would have signed their names directly on their chests. Kamen Rider. Dr. Octopus roared. Chen Yi looked at Dr. Octopus, who was controlled by the machine in front of him pitifully, and crushed all the mechanical arms mercilessly. The parts and metal fragments scattered on the ground seemed to tell the crazy battle just now. Dr. Octopus, who lost his mechanical arm, also regained his sanity. He looked around in confusion at first, and then begged Chen Yi, please kill me, I don't want to kill innocent people anymore. Chen Yi didn't say anything, just looked at him coldly. Then, he walked up and punched Dr. Octopus on the head, knocking him unconscious. Then, Chen Yi forcibly pulled out the mechanical arm attached to Dr. Octopus's neck, and blood gushed out instantly. In this way, Dr. Octopus will no longer be controlled by the mechanical arm. After doing all this, Chen Yi took out a magic bean from his pocket and put it next to Dr. Octopus' mouth. Dr. Octopus is still useful to Chen Yi now. Chen Yi also wants to know from Dr. Octopus whether he is from this universe, and if not, how he got here. After all, according to Chen Yi's own understanding, this universe should be a few years away from the birth of Dr. Octopus. Chen Yi's heart is full of doubts and curiosity, and he needs more information to answer these questions. So he decided to keep Dr. Octopus temporarily. Maybe after he wakes up, he can get some useful information from him. Then Chen Yi picked up Dr. Octopus with one hand and quickly left the scene. Soon the police blocked the scene, and medical staff and firefighters also started on-site rescue. The onlookers and the audience in front of the TV started a discussion about this hero. The hero Kamen Rider left the scene in style. It's a pity that we couldn't interview him. Who is this Kamen Rider? NNC will continue to report for you. A reporter excitedly reported to the camera. Peter Parker also dragged his exhausted body back home and fell asleep on the bed, still muttering Kamen Rider. In a corner near Chen Yi's battlefield, a man who looked like Black Spider-Man said to himself, I thought there were no superheroes in this universe. Fortunately, I didn't go out to hunt rashly. This person was Eddie, who was possessed by venom. There was black liquid on Eddie's left face, as if telling Eddie that he needed to eat. Okay, there's plenty of food here. Besides, didn't you just eat too? Wait until you are full and drink enough, then go deal with this Kamen Rider. Eddie said, covering his squirming face. Unfortunately, there is no Spider-Man in this world. I have to repay him for blowing me into a brand new universe. Eddie laughed unscrupulously. He originally thought that he was killed by Spider-Man's bomb, but he didn't expect that it was a blessing in disguise. Not only could he communicate with Venom, but he also traveled to a new universe. He is not the uncontrollable guy like Dr. Octopus. He is a reporter himself, so he naturally knows where to get information most easily. After a simple search and the fact that Venom devoured the memories of the two guys, he roughly understood that this is a universe without superheroes. As for the Kamen Rider who just appeared, Eddie thought that as long as Venom accumulated enough energy, no one would be his opponent, so he was not to be feared. Eddie's smile became brighter and brighter, and he began to plan how to show his power in this new universe. It happened that the two Nikos passed by Eddie. Eddie walked into the alley of the old man's house and saw Eddie alone. The two Nikos walked towards Eddie with ill intentions. Seeing this, Eddie muttered to himself, this is another two foods delivered to the door. Then in the horrified eyes of the two Nikos, Venom opened his bloody mouth and swallowed the two. A minute later, Eddie walked out slowly, and there was no trace of the two Nikos inside. He decided to find some food to fill Venom's stomach first, and then find a safe place to slowly plan his actions. On the other side, Harry, who had just returned home, saw a pile of blood on the ground and his dying father. His face turned pale in an instant, and his steps staggered a few steps. Then he ran to his father Osborn in fear and asked in panic, Dad, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Harry looked at Osborn anxiously with tears in his eyes, and his body was shaking constantly. He held his father's hand tightly, trying to feel his signs of life, but in the end he only felt a coldness. Then Harry shouted around with red eyes, where are the people? Is there anyone? Call an ambulance for me. Harry looked around with red eyes, and saw that the living room was in a mess, with blood and scars all over the floor. He roared angrily around, who is it? Come out. However, there was silence around, and no one responded to Harry's roar. At this time, he noticed that his father's finger slowly pointed behind Harry. Harry turned around and saw a man in a green mecha on a skateboard with a pumpkin bomb in his hand. This man looked a little weird. He was wearing a strange mecha and holding a strange weapon in his hand, which made the whole scene even more weird and terrifying. Harry looked at the appearance of this man in horror, and his heart was full of doubts and fear. He asked, who are you? Why are you here? Why did you kill my father? The man in the green mecha looked at Harry, who was kneeling on the ground in fear, took off his helmet and slowly said, Harry, you are still the same waste as always, my waste son. This man is Osborn Green Goblin from the parallel universe. The Green Goblin looked exactly like his father. Harry looked at the Green Goblin in front of him with fear, and he was speechless for a moment. The Green Goblin walked slowly towards Harry, throwing a pumpkin bomb in his hand. I am your father, Harry. Why are you looking at me with such fear? The Green Goblin said with an evil smile. You are not my father, how can you be my father? You are not my father. Harry shouted in horror. He could not accept that the evil Green Goblin in front of him was his father. The Green Goblin looked at Harry in disappointment. Forget it, I'll send you to see your father. Next, I'll treat our little Spider-Man well. The Green Goblin's words made Harry feel even more frightened. He was afraid that he would be killed by the Green Goblin, but now he had no other choice. When the Green Goblin first came to this world, he was still a little confused. When he wandered around trying to find the familiar Osborn building in this world, the Green Goblin instantly changed direction. The Green Goblin believed that since there was an Osborn building, it must be that he had survived the disaster and returned directly to his home. Unexpectedly, there was an Osborn who had not yet become the Green Goblin at home, which made the Green Goblin confirm that he was not back to the original world, but came to a brand new world. There is also Osborn in this brand new world, and there is also himself, so there must be the Spider-Man he hates. So the Green Goblin decided to kill Osborn in front of him first, and then continue to survive in place of Osborn in this world. However, just as the Green Goblin was about to take action, the conscience of the Green Goblin, that is, Osborn, woke up. The Green Goblin is Norman Osborn's second personality after using the human enhancement potion developed by the company. The Green Goblin's fingers trembled slightly. He looked at the bomb in his hand, then looked at himself lying on the ground, and Harry who was looking at him in horror. He saw his own figure and asked Harry in confusion, "Child, don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. What's going on here? Why is there another me?" Harry was confused by his words and looked at him, not knowing how to answer. His heart tightened, but he still tried to stay calm. "The one lying here is my father Osborn, a well-known entrepreneur. He was hurt by you. Please save him." Harry took advantage of the gap with Osborn and secretly called the police on his mobile phone. Osborn sighed, obviously noticing Harry's little move. But Osborn didn't care, because his second personality, the Green Goblin, began to stir again, and it seemed that there were two of him fighting for sovereignty in his mind. He could only cover his head with a painful face. He knew he couldn't let this situation continue. "I am Osborn, but sometimes I turn into the Green Goblin. That is my evil personality," Osborn answered with difficulty, his voice full of helplessness and pain. "I don't know why I am here, and I don't know why it has become like this. Child, I can't answer your questions, you just need to know that I am also your father." Just as Osborn wanted to continue explaining, the Green Goblin in his mind could no longer be suppressed. He felt his body begin to change, and the originally peaceful inner world was instantly broken. He knew that he didn't have much time. At this moment, the Green Goblin suddenly rushed out of his body and laughed wildly, "Ha ha ha. This is my power. I'm back." Harry knew that someone had changed now, because Harry saw that his eyes were full of evil and fanaticism. "Is this really my father?" Harry was full of questions. Then Osborn fought back to control his body. He shouted to Harry with his remaining reason, "Run. Go find Peter Parker." Osborn knew that he couldn't let the Green Goblin appear again, and he couldn't let Harry get hurt. So he endured the pain, rode on the flying skateboard, and flew away. He knew that once the Green Goblin appeared, he would come back here again. He just wanted to buy time to give Harry, the poor child, enough time to escape. At this time, the panicked Harry finally came to his senses and quickly picked up the phone to call a doctor. But Harry himself was still a little confused as to why he was asked to find Peter Parker. But before he could think about it, the police had already arrived quickly. After all, Osborn was a local taxpayer. The policemen surrounded Harry nervously. They knew they were dealing with a very serious matter. They had to act quickly and accurately to ensure the safety of everyone. They began to give first aid to Osborn, who fell to the ground, while understanding the specific situation with Harry. On the other side, Osborn began to fly quickly on a skateboard. Osborn didn't know where to go, but he knew that as long as he was as far away from Harry as possible. At this moment, a large black shadow suddenly appeared in the sky and flew quickly to Osborn. Osborn turned his head with difficulty and looked. It was obviously a bald man with wings flying in the air. The bald man said to Osborn, "Hey, Green Goblin. I know you. Introduce myself, I am Vulture. Do you want to join forces to rule the world together?" It is obvious that Vulture has realized that this world is no longer the previous world, and the reason why he values Green Goblin is also very simple. After all, Vulture has no funds and equipment when he first arrived. If he wants to strengthen his strength, he needs the funding of Osborn Enterprises. Vulture's real name is Adrian Toombs. He was originally an electronic engineer and had always had a dream of flying. He did countless experiments to build a pair of wings like a bird, but he was deceived by a businessman and imprisoned because he lacked research funds. After escaping from prison, his temperament changed drastically. He used the flying suit he invented to transform into a vulture and began to take revenge on society. It is obvious that he has suffered a loss last time. This time he is going to find the largest company to fund him. He is not worried that the Green Goblin will disagree. If he disagrees, he will use his own strength to make the other party agree. Osborn did not pay attention to the vulture at this moment, because he could no longer control himself at this moment. The Green Goblin appeared again, and his cunning smile and flashing cold eyes revealed his coldness and evil. He, if you want me to invest, then let me see if you are qualified. The Green Goblin said contemptuously, and his skateboard changed position instantly, and a machine gun suddenly appeared. With a light tap of his fingers, the machine gun began to madly shoot at the vulture. The vulture saw the sudden change in the Green Goblin's temperament and became alert instantly. The vulture quickly took off, and then pulled up the laser gun to counterattack the Green Goblin. A fierce air battle began, and the vulture fought with the Green Goblin with his flight suit and laser gun. The Green Goblin's machine gun kept roaring, trying to shoot down the vulture in one fell swoop, but the vulture relied on superb skills and strong strength to dodge the attacks again and even counterattacked successfully. The Green Goblin's skateboard did not fly as high as the vulture's flying height, so it was a bit difficult to hit from bottom to top. Suddenly, the vulture dived, and the laser of the laser gun shot directly at the Green Goblin's machine gun, destroying it instantly. Seeing this, the Green Goblin's face changed, and he knew that he had encountered a strong enemy this time. The vulture seized the opportunity and dived to attack the Green Goblin directly. When it was about to succeed, the Green Goblin suddenly disappeared from the spot, leaving the vulture empty-handed. When the Green Goblin appeared again, he had a sharp dagger in his hand. He rushed towards the vulture in an instant. When the dagger was swung, a cold light flashed, and the vulture was immediately shocked and broke into a cold sweat. However, at this moment, the Green Goblin suddenly stopped attacking, and he looked at the vulture with surprise and confusion in his eyes. It turned out that the vulture had escaped the disaster at the last moment by using the special function of the flight suit. The Green Goblin looked at the vulture coldly. It seems that you really have some skills. He put away the machine gun and dagger. Since you have this strength, then I will give you a chance. Come with me. After that, the Green Goblin controlled his skateboard and left directly. The vulture let out a long breath and followed the Green Goblin. He knew that if the battle just now lasted a little longer, he would probably have to run for his life. Because his energy was about to be exhausted, he could now cooperate with the Green Goblin in front of him, which was also a preliminary achievement of his goal. Chen Yi brought Dr. Octopus to the small villa, which was originally the residence of a pair of illegal activities, but now has become a trophy for Chen Yi to eliminate harm for the people. After some cleaning, the residence looks clean and tidy. Put Dr. Octopus in an empty room, while Chen Yi closed his eyes and rested, thinking about the next action plan. During this period, Chen Yi has confirmed that the Dr. Octopus in front of him is from another universe, because Chen Yi used the observation hockey to feel 4 or 5 similar auras. This is a bit like the plot in Spider-Man 3 in the previous life. The enemies of each Spider-Man universe traveled through time and space just to kill Spider-Man. The difference is that Peter Parker here has not even made a Spider-Man suit yet. Peter's uncle is not dead yet, and he has not said the classic saying, "The greater the power, the greater the responsibility." With Peter's current strength, Dr. Octopus can't beat him, let alone other villains. If Chen Yi did not appear in this universe, there would be no superheroes in this universe, and Spider-Man would definitely be killed. The future of this universe will be full of darkness and terror, and those villains will do evil unscrupulously. The most urgent task is that Chen Yi needs to determine who the remaining villains in this universe are and eliminate them. In this way, the task should be perfectly solved and he can go back. Besides, some people can also be won over. Speaking of the villains in the Spider-Man universe, Chen Yi wants to laugh. Basically, they are all highly educated people, and then he has to test the poison himself. Either they are controlled by the things they invented, or they become lizards, or they are out of control. But these highly educated people are exactly the talents that Hell's Kitchen lacks. Chen Yi is not afraid of their blind inventions. Anyway, no matter how those inventors toss, Chen Yi has the ability to prevent them from losing control. 2 hours later, Dr. Octopus woke up from the bed slowly and struggled to sit up. He was surprised to find that there was no mechanical arm around him. He touched his neck uncertainly. He found that his neck was very smooth, without any trace of being connected by the mechanical arm. Dr. Octopus opened his eyes wide, then slapped himself with his hand, and felt obvious pain on his face. He murmured to himself, "Is it possible that everything that happened before was a dream? Have I never been controlled by the mechanical arm from beginning to end?" At this moment, a voice sounded in the room, "You are not dreaming. You are a professor who has received higher education, but you can still be controlled by a mechanical arm. It's really embarrassing." Dr. Octopus turned his head and found Chen Yi leaning against the wall. He slowly said, "My name is Chen Yi. If I guess correctly, you should not belong to this universe. As for how to help you release the control, you may not understand, but it is easy for me." After listening to Chen Yi's, his pupils dilated. He didn't expect Chen Yi to know that he was not from this universe. He also thought that Chen Yi could help him get rid of the control. "You are not from this universe either. Where is this place? Why did I come here? Am I not dead?" Dr. Octopus had many questions in his mind. "Yes, the difference is that I came here actively, and you entered this universe passively. As for why you came here, maybe you have a common enemy." Chen Yi kept it a secret. "Who is it?" Dr. Octopus asked excitedly. "Spider-Man, Peter Parker." Chen Yi spoke slowly. "Peter." Dr. Octopus was stunned. "Yes, it's Peter, the one you know. To put it in a simple way, you traveled back to the past." Chen Yi answered affirmatively. Dr. Octopus stood up excitedly when he heard Chen Yi's words. His eyes were full of expectation and nervousness. He asked eagerly, "So, you mean that there are me and my wife in this world?" Dr. Octopus's mood at the moment is complicated. He is afraid that he and his wife in this universe will fall into tragedy again, and he needs to stop them immediately. "Don't worry, Spider-Man in this universe has just been born, and it will take a long time for you to complete the invention and brew tragedy." Chen Yi comforted. Then Chen Yi gave Dr. Octopus popular science about parallel universes and told Dr. Octopus why Chen Yi saved him. After listening to Chen Yi's popular science, Dr. Octopus knew that if he wanted to protect this universe from being destroyed, Peter Parker was the key. He didn't expect that he was just a stepping stone on Peter's growth path. "Thank you for saving me. After the matter is over, I am willing to return to your universe with you. Now I don't have too many concerns, and this old life is handed over to you," Dr. Octopus said sincerely. After all, he is now a lonely man, and the only thing he cares about is himself and his wife in this universe. If he could save himself and his wife in this universe, that would be his greatest wish and comfort. As long as things are over, in order to repay the life-saving grace, Dr. Octopus is willing to join Chen Yi's team. Dr. Octopus still has a little selfishness. Following Chen Yi in front of him, he might be able to travel through various parallel universes and save more of himself and his wife. Being able to freely travel through various parallel time and space is a big temptation for a physics doctor. Chen Yi was moved after listening to Dr. Octopus's words. He understood Dr. Octopus's determination and expectations, so he nodded and expressed his willingness to help Dr. Octopus fulfill this wish. Chen Yi's system interface also popped up a prompt. "Congratulations to the host, Otto Gunther Octavius has become your friend." Quote. "Congratulations to the host, Otto Gunther Octavius's friend degree is full of stars." The two of them were very happy. "Then let's rest tonight. Tomorrow I'll go find Peter Parker, and you go and fulfill your wish," Chen Yi said slowly. "Considering that you don't have the ability to fight now, I'll ask one of my partners to protect your safety," Chen Yi added, his eyes flashing with a deep light, as if looking for a trustworthy partner. Dr. Octopus looked at Chen Yi gratefully. He didn't expect that there would be someone in the world who cared about him, an old man. A warm current surged in his heart. "I don't know who this person is and where he is." Dr. Octopus looked around and didn't find anyone, so he asked curiously. "I'll see it soon," Chen Yi replied mysteriously. Dr. Octopus saw Chen Yi put his hands in his pockets, and then slowly spoke. His voice was deep and powerful, as if he was summoning some kind of power. On your right. Then a magic circle appeared on Chen Yi's right. In Dr. Octopus's sight, a figure walked out of the magic circle. It was a hero wearing a strange red suit similar to Spider-Man, holding a knife in both hands, and he looked like a warrior who had experienced many battles. Just as Dr. Octopus was sighing that Chen Yi's partner was so reliable, the hero who had just walked out of the magic circle suddenly broke the solemnity. He said to Chen Yi with a proud face, "Cool, Chen Yi, this is how I appear." This guy summoned by Chen Yi showed his unique personality and charm as soon as he appeared. However, the next second, Deadpool became even more outrageous. He asked Chen Yi seriously, "Also, why do you have to summon me? I'm looking for my true love recently. I know that I am more important than Wanda in your mind. You miss me, right?" As he said, he also shook Chen Yi's shoulders, as if to confirm Chen Yi's inner thoughts. Dr. Octopus on the side watched this scene, hesitant to speak. He was full of curiosity about this hero who suddenly appeared. He was not sure whether this seemingly unreliable hero could really protect him. Chen Yi slapped Deadpool's hand away from his shoulder speechlessly, and then introduced Dr. Octopus. "Dr. Octopus, you can call him Deadpool, he is the guy who will protect you tomorrow. Although he seems unreliable, no one can hurt you from him." Deadpool noticed Dr. Octopus this time, and Deadpool first looked at Dr. Octopus up and down. Then he patted his chest and assured, "Yes, I will protect you, you are from a parallel universe. There is nothing special, I thought you would look like an alien." Although his words were a bit frivolous, the seriousness and determination in his eyes could not be ignored. Dr. Octopus looked at him, and couldn't help but feel a sense of inexplicable trust in his heart. Perhaps, this seemingly unreliable hero can really protect himself. Deadpool didn't care about Dr. Octopus's reaction. He put his arm around Dr. Octopus's shoulders and began to ask about his past. He wanted to know what kind of story this person from a parallel universe had experienced and why he appeared here. Dr. Octopus didn't resist. He began to tell his own experience. Those pains, joys, setbacks and successes were intertwined to form a colorful life. During the conversation between the two, Chen Yi quietly walked out of the room. He didn't disturb them because he knew that Deadpool at this moment was the real Deadpool. He was a trustworthy partner and guardian. And Dr. Octopus also needed to relax himself and open his heart in such an atmosphere. So summoning Deadpool was the right choice for Chen Yi. Chen Yi stood at the end of the corridor, looking at the night sky outside the window. He knew that tomorrow would be a new day full of challenges and opportunities. On the other side, Peter, who had just woken up, was looking at the mirror in front of him with a puzzled look. He found that his eyesight had recovered and he no longer needed to wear the thick black framed glasses. He also had 8 abdominal muscles. He began to pose constantly to admire his new body. "Peter, are you okay? Have you changed?" Aunt May asked Peter outside the door. Peter looked at himself and nodded, then responded loudly, "Yes, there are big changes." Aunt May heard Peter's answer and quickly reminded, "Hurry up, you're going to be late." Then Peter looked at the window next door. Mary smiled foolishly. Looking at his new self, Peter felt that he was finally qualified to pursue her. His eyes flashed with determination, and his face was filled with unprecedented confidence and expectation. Then he went out to class. Just when Peter wanted to go up to talk to Mary, he found that Mary was picked up by a classmate who had a car. Then Peter hit the wall. Peter looked at the hole in the wall that he had hit in disbelief, and then looked at his hand. Before Peter knew whether it was his own problem, Peter missed the school bus again. Soon noon passed. Peter did not attend the class properly in the morning. He was studying the strange changes in his body. Even Harry did not come to class today. In the cafeteria, Peter was eating while watching his goddess Mary walk by him. Mary seemed to be immersed in the sadness of losing her boyfriend. She did not notice the water stains under her feet and accidentally slipped. Peter quickly hugged Mary and held up the lunch that should have fallen with a tray. "Wow, what a quick reaction. Thank you." Mary was hugged by Peter and looked at Peter in amazement. Peter looked at Mary, who had regained her smile, and said, "You're welcome." Their eyes met, and Mary looked at Peter's eyes with admiration and praised, "You have a pair of beautiful blue eyes. I didn't notice it when you were wearing glasses before." Then Mary left. Peter was left with a silly smile on his face. Peter was very happy. This was the first time Mary praised him. This was a good start. Just as Peter was enjoying the food, he suddenly felt an unusual sticky feeling. He looked down and was surprised to find that his hand was stuck to the fork. What was even more unbelievable was that strands of spider silk as thin as hair shot out from his palm. Peter's heart suddenly tightened, and he looked around in a hurry, fearing that this scene would be seen by other classmates and become the object of their ridicule. Peter hurriedly put down the fork in his hand and stood up nervously. He didn't dare to stay for a moment, and turned around and ran towards the exit of the cafeteria. His heartbeat accelerated, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. His mind was filled with fear of the unknown, and at the same time, he was also filled with confusion and puzzlement about his new abilities. Peter ran out of the school in one breath and came to a remote alley. He leaned against the wall, panting, trying to calm himself down. He looked at his hands, his heart full of panic and confusion. He didn't know why he suddenly had such an ability, nor did he know how to deal with it. Just when Peter felt helpless and confused, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. "Why, are you afraid of your new ability?" Peter turned his head suddenly and looked around vigilantly. I saw a figure slowly walking out from the depths of the alley. When Peter saw this figure, his heart trembled violently. He couldn't believe his eyes, because this figure was exactly the same as the Kamen Rider he had seen on TV. He was wearing a black cloak and the iconic blue and white mask on his face. Peter was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He pointed at the figure tremblingly and stammered, You are Kamen Rider." His voice was full of surprise and disbelief. The knight that Peter Parker saw was Chen Yi. Chen Yi did not expect to see the panicked Peter as soon as he went out today. Chen Yi looked at Peter Parker's eyes and understood that he had not yet adapted to the sudden spider ability. This kind of power is both a gift and a challenge for Peter. Chen Yi decided to give this future superhero some necessary care and guidance as a senior. In Chen Yi's eyes, if the plot of the movie develops, Peter may appear powerless when facing an enemy like Dr. Octopus, and may even fail directly. And now, they are facing more than one Dr. Octopus. This situation makes Chen Yi feel that it is necessary to come forward in person to help Peter better master and use his abilities. Peter looked at the Kamen Rider in front of him, his heart was full of excitement. He has always regarded Kamen Rider as his idol. Now, he can actually get close to this hero, which makes him feel extremely surprised. He looked at the blue and white armor. His heart was full of awe and envy. He almost couldn't help but want to reach out and touch it. "Excuse me, can I take a photo with you?" Peter asked with excitement in his eyes. For him, this is not just a simple photo, but also a manifestation of his admiration and yearning for the hero. However, Peter noticed that the Kamen Rider in front of him did not respond to him immediately, but looked at him with a deep and silent look. Peter began to feel uneasy in his heart. He felt that something seemed to be wrong. Chen Yi looked at Peter, who wanted to escape in front of him, stretched out his right hand, and a golden halo suddenly appeared behind Peter. Chen Yi planned to use the portal to take Peter to a deserted place to beat him up. After all, there are many people here, and Chen Yi can't show it. Then Chen Yi flashed in front of Peter and kicked Peter into the portal. Peter had never expected such a change, and he could only be kicked into the portal passively. When Peter fell out of the portal, he looked around and found himself in a deserted place with only an endless plain. Peter's heart was full of confusion and fear. He didn't know where this place was, nor did he know what the Kamen Rider wanted to do to him. As if seeing Peter's doubts, Chen Yi slowly said, "Want to be a hero? Then let me see your awareness." Then Chen Yi, who transformed into Kamen Rider Eternal, began to attack Peter. After all, Peter just had spider sense, which gave him a sharp reaction speed and intuition like a spider. But Peter can't fully control this ability at present, and he can barely react in the first few times. But as Chen Yi's attack became faster and faster, Peter seemed to be in a hurry under his attack, sometimes dodging awkwardly and sometimes being hit hard. Although he tried his best to resist, he was still beaten by Chen Yi's attack and vomited blood repeatedly. Peter was beaten by Chen Yi's attack and vomited blood. Chen Yi looked down at Peter and said coldly, "That's all you have. I've seen people with the same abilities as you, and they are not so weak." His words hurt Peter's self-esteem like a needle. Even if you have superpowers, you are still a waste. Just continue to be bullied by others. Chen Yi kept stimulating Peter with words, trying to arouse his will. Peter, who fell to the ground, felt very aggrieved. He was inexplicably pulled in and beaten. Then he was often bullied by others, and he was still bullied by others after gaining superpowers. Every day, he endured the ridicule and bullying of others, as if his existence was to be the object of others' entertainment. Peter had had enough of this kind of life. His eyes were full of anger. He clenched his fists and clenched his teeth tightly, as if he was going to use all his strength to resist this helpless feeling. He tried to support his tired body and stood up. He stared at Chen Yi in front of him and shouted loudly, "I don't want to be bullied anymore. I want to be a superhero admired by everyone." His voice was full of firmness and determination. Then Chen Yi rushed over with a punch. However, his attack seemed chaotic and there was no method at all. Chen Yi easily dodged his attack and said, "It's useless to be a superhero just by talking. You must make good use of your spider sense." Quote. Then Chen Yi kicked Peter several meters away. Peter fell heavily to the ground, but he did not give up. Chen Yi's words made Peter sober instantly. He realized that to become a real superhero, it was not enough to rely on anger and determination alone. He must make good use of his spider sense to defeat the enemy in front of him. So, Peter began to work hard to adjust his state, trying to integrate spider sense into his attack. He closed his eyes, felt the movement around him, and tried to capture every subtle sound and breath. In his perception, Chen Yi's movements became slow and clear, as if the whole world slowed down. Chen Yi looked at Peter's figure, who kept trying and working hard, and a hint of appreciation flashed in his eyes. So, Chen Yi stepped up. He increased the intensity of his attacks, trying to make Peter better adapt to the battle. While attacking, he taught Peter how to better use spider sense and spider silk. He told Peter that to become a true superhero, he must not only have great strength and speed, but also be good at using his skills and wisdom. Peter continued to work hard under Chen Yi's guidance. His attacks became more and more accurate, and his reaction speed became faster and faster. He began to be able to flexibly use his spider silk, wrapping it around Chen Yi's body to restrict his movements. His attacks also became more swift and powerful, and he saw that he had fought back and forth with the common rider in front of him. Peter suddenly became excited and thought he could defeat the common rider in front of him, and shouted loudly, "It's my turn." Then he attacked Chen Yi. Chen Yi sneered, "I'll teach you one more thing. Never underestimate the enemy, and don't overestimate your abilities." Quote. His words were full of sarcasm and contempt, as if telling Peter that he still had a long way to go. Then Chen Yi pressed the USB drive on his belt. Eternal maximum drive. Go, enjoy the fun of hell, I hope you can survive this blow. Chen Yi's right foot began to gather blue flame energy, and he jumped into the air like a blue lightning. Then, he fell rapidly and kicked towards Peter. Peter looked at this scene, his heart filled with fear. He knew that he could no longer avoid this blow, and could only bite the bullet to meet it. The two of them were beaten. Okay, I've reduced the intensity a lot. I'm just teaching you a lesson. Remember, don't overestimate yourself next time. The enemy won't show mercy. Chen Yi slowly spoke to Peter, who was lying on the ground, his cloak fluttering in the wind. Peter lay on the ground, his eyes full of surprise and confusion. Peter recalled the scene just now, and he still had lingering fears in his heart. The moment he saw Chen Yi use the night kick on him, a revolving lantern had appeared in his heart. He thought his life was about to end, but he didn't expect that Chen Yi's night kick didn't cause him fatal damage. He looked up at the common rider, his eyes full of awe and gratitude. He knew that this time he overestimated his own strength, which led to such a fate. He also understood that this lesson was to make him realize his shortcomings so that he could be more cautious and rational in future battles. Thank you. May I ask who you are and why you want to teach me these things? Peter got up from the ground and bowed deeply to the common rider. I know I was wrong. I will remember this lesson and will not make the same mistake again. Peter was really curious about who was under the mask, who would teach him so hard and control such a powerful force. Could it be Uncle Ben under the mask? Uncle Ben is so old. Could it be Harry? Peter is more and more likely. Only Harry's family has the ability to create such a high-tech knight. Chen Yi looked at Peter, and a glimmer of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. He knew that Peter had understood his intention. He hoped that Peter could learn from this experience and become more mature and stable. I'm just a common rider passing by. I will come to you again. After Chen Yi finished speaking, he walked into the portal. Chen Yi turned around and looked at Peter, who was still standing there stupidly, and reminded him, "Why don't you come over? Are you going to stay there forever?" Peter woke up as if from a dream, and quickly ran to the portal and quickly ran into the golden light circle. This time he looked at the light circle carefully. But he didn't see any doorway. After all, he just went through this door and returned to the place just now. When Peter wanted to ask Kamen Rider, he turned around and found that Kamen Rider had disappeared. Although Peter couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, he was soon attracted by his newly acquired spider ability, and all his low mood disappeared. In the evening, Peter, who was still immersed in joy, happened to see the goddess Mary next door standing at the door. He had a thought in his heart, and wanted to go over and talk to Mary. Peter had become much more confident after obtaining the spider ability. If it was before, he didn't dare to talk to Mary, and only dared to watch from afar. However, just when Peter was about to walk over, Mary was called over by her new boyfriend. Peter felt mixed emotions as he watched Mary and her new boyfriend walk towards the brand new car. The joy of the superpowers he had just obtained was also dispersed by the scene before his eyes. He thought that with superpowers, he could impress Mary and pursue Mary. But now this scene made Peter understand a truth. In this world, only by becoming rich can you be useful, and only with money can Mary look at you in the right eye. Thinking of this, Peter clenched his fists, and his eyes showed a desire for money. He decided to go back and study how to make money with his superpowers, and he also wanted to buy a car. Peter could only watch his goddess Mary drive away in someone else's new car. After returning home, Peter immediately took out the newspaper and began to screen the vehicles he could buy. His eyes quickly scanned every line and every word from top to bottom, as if he was looking for his dream. The first thing that caught his eye was a Bentley worth $30,000. Peter shook his head gently. The price was too expensive for him and he couldn't afford it. He sighed and continued to look down. Then, a Porsche worth $25,000 came into his sight. Peter frowned. He didn't like the style of Porsche very much. Peter continued to turn the page. The price was $15,000. It was better to save the money for Uncle Ben and Aunt May to subsidize the family. Buying a car was still too extravagant. Peter continued to look down. Just when he was about to lose his patience, he finally saw hope. On the last page, the convertible sports car, which cost only $2,598, attracted his attention. Peter's eyes lit up instantly, and he felt a strong impulse. This is the car he wanted. Peter said that the price didn't matter, the most important thing was that the convertible was attractive, so he decided to choose it. He began to think about how to raise the money. Just as he was thinking hard, a news advertisement caught his attention. The advertisement said that as long as you can last 3 minutes in a professional wrestling match, you will have a chance to win a bonus of $3,000. Peter's eyes lit up immediately, and he saw hope. He thought of Mary. If he could win this game, he could buy the convertible sports car. Mary would definitely look at him with new eyes, and might even throw herself into his arms. This idea gave Peter full of motivation, and he decided to participate in this game. For a time, Peter was full of motivation and began to design his outfit overnight. He imagined a beautiful life with Mary in his mind, and imagined the scene of them driving the convertible sports car on the street together. This beautiful vision filled him with strength, and he was determined to win the game. In this way, Peter spent a long night in fantasy and hard work. The next day, Peter was ready to leave the house happily. Uncle Ben suggested to see Peter off, but Peter refused because he didn't want to trouble Uncle Ben. But Uncle Ben also got dressed and insisted on seeing Peter off. "I just want to go out for some fresh air, let's go together." The tone sounded so good that Peter couldn't refuse. Soon Uncle Ben and Peter arrived at the destination. Peter obviously wanted to go to the game quickly, so he picked up his school bag and prepared to leave. "Thank you, Uncle Ben, I'll go first," Peter said to Uncle Ben. "Wait a minute, we have to talk," Uncle Ben said with a slightly heavy tone. Can we talk later? Peter tried to postpone the conversation, but Uncle Ben shook his head firmly. If you want, we can talk now. Uncle Ben's tone revealed an unquestionable firmness that Peter couldn't refuse. Peter sighed helplessly, knowing that he could not escape this conversation. He rolled his eyes and said impatiently, "Is there anything that needs to be said now?" Uncle Ben looked at Peter, with a trace of worry in his eyes. He said seriously, "Yes, it must be said now. We haven't talked for a long time." Peter frowned. He didn't understand why Uncle Ben wanted to talk about this at this time. He felt that he had done nothing wrong. You don't do housework every day now, and you stay in your room and do your own things when you get home. You are changing, I understand. At your age, I am the same as you. Peter wanted to refute. He felt that Uncle Ben did not understand him. However, Uncle Ben did not give him a chance. He continued, "Peter, your transformation in these few years will determine who you will become in the future. Be careful not to go astray. Remember, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility." Uncle Ben pointed to Peter's heart and said. Peter couldn't help feeling uncomfortable when he heard this. He felt that Uncle Ben was interfering in his life and trying to control his future. He glared at Uncle Ben and said unhappily, "Do you think I will become a bad person? Don't worry, things are different now, I can solve it. Don't lecture me, okay?" After that, Peter opened the car door heavily. He did not look back, nor did he see the deep worry and helplessness in Uncle Ben's eyes. Peter did not know that if nothing unexpected happened, this would be the last time he heard Uncle Ben's teachings. The two of them were so busy that they had to face each other. Peter, who was full of desire for money and marry, ignored Uncle Ben's advice and only wanted to go to the wrestling match. His thoughts were like leaves in the wind, drifting and difficult to stay. When he stepped into the noisy arena, he was shocked by the tens of thousands of spectators and the performances of the passionate professional wrestlers on the stage. Their cheers, applause, and the fierce confrontation between the wrestlers were like electric currents, impacting Peter's nerves. He seemed to see himself standing on the stage, hearing the cheers of the audience, and feeling the joy of victory. Uncle Ben's advice had long been thrown behind his head. However, just when he was about to make up his mind to sign up for the competition, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. "Is this really a good idea? Have you forgotten all the advice Uncle Ben gave you?" Peter's heartbeat accelerated instantly, and he looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. Finally, he found the source of the voice, a figure that he was very familiar with, his old classmate Chen Yi. He stood in the shadow of the corridor, with a smile on his face, but his eyes revealed an indescribable depth. Peter's vigilance and doubts intertwined on his face, and he looked at Chen Yi, his heart full of confusion. He couldn't understand why Chen Yi was here, and why he knew about his conversation with Uncle Ben. Why are you here?" Peter's voice was a little nervous. Could it be that this Chen Yi is a stalker? Peter's heart was full of vigilance, and he began to wonder if his whereabouts had been mastered by Chen Yi. Chen Yi looked at the vigilant Peter and said with a smile, "I just happened to come over and saw your uncle chatting with you in the car. It seems that you two are not chatting happily, so I guess that he was lecturing you." After listening to Chen Yi's explanation, Peter's tense nerves relaxed a little. It turned out that he misunderstood Chen Yi. The other party just happened to pass by and did not follow him. Peter felt a little embarrassed. He originally thought that Chen Yi was a perverted stalker and almost made a joke. "Why, you seem to be very interested in this game, are you going to participate by yourself?" Chen Yi looked at Peter with a hint of teasing in his eyes. Peter waved his hand quickly. No, I just came to take a look. I am still very interested in wrestling." Peter did not intend to reveal his intentions, for fear that Chen Yi would complain to Uncle Ben. After all, if Uncle Ben knew that he was secretly participating in the competition, he would probably be opposed and stopped. Then how about watching it together? Chen Yi made an invitation. Chen Yi knew that Peter was going to participate in the competition, but he just wanted to tease Peter. No, take your time, I'm going to the bathroom first." Peter rejected Chen Yi's invitation. If he followed this guy to watch the game, Peter would not have the opportunity to participate in the game. This way, he could not earn 3,000 yuan to buy a car and pick up girls, so after Peter refused, he wanted to leave directly. Looking at Peter's back as he hurried away, Chen Yi smiled mysteriously. He knew what choice Peter would make, but he did not say it out loud. He just left a piece of advice. No matter what choice you make today, you must think clearly, otherwise you will regret it. Peter frowned at Chen Yi, as if he didn't understand the purpose of Chen Yi's words at all. Did he know that I was going to participate in the game? Peter shook his head, and regardless of this inexplicable Chen Yi, he quickly went to the bathroom to change his clothes and sign up for the game. When he came to the registration office, the lady in charge of registration looked at his thin figure and the strange costume and frowned. She repeatedly confirmed whether Peter really wanted to participate in the competition, because in her eyes, Peter looked more like a clown who came to join in the fun than a real wrestler. However, Peter's determination was not shaken by her doubts. He nodded firmly and handed in his registration form. After a lot of trouble, it was finally Peter's turn. The host took the list and looked at the name of the next person to appear, Human Spider, and he frowned slightly. This name seemed too ordinary and unattractive in his eyes. So he changed the name on his own initiative. Next, please welcome our new challenger, the dreaded Spider-Man. The host said passionately on the scene. Introduced. However, the audience had no hope when they saw Peter's thin body, thinking that this kid could not last more than a minute, which was simply a waste of time. So there was a lot of booing at the scene, as if they were laughing at Peter for overestimating his ability. The game started, and Peter showed all the skills that Chen Yi had trained him with yesterday. His movements were swift and accurate, and every attack caught his opponent off guard. He cleverly dodged his opponent's attacks, and then took the opportunity to launch a counterattack. He easily solved the professional wrestler. The audience was stunned by Peter's performance. They couldn't believe that this thin body could burst out with such powerful power. They began to cheer for Peter, and their applause and cheers filled the entire arena. Peter stood on the field, feeling the joy of victory. He knew that all this was because he was trained by Kamen Rider yesterday. Although the training at that time made him miserable, all the efforts were worth it. Peter's face was full of smiles. He would soon get $3,000 to buy a car and go to marry. Why only $100? This is different from the agreed $3,000. Peter looked at the boss who was giving out bonuses with a puzzled look on his face. The boss obviously didn't take Peter seriously. Stupid, look carefully for yourself. 3 minutes and $3,000. You only worked for 2 minutes. It's good to have money. His words were full of indifference and ruthlessness, and he seemed to not care about Peter's feelings at all. Peter felt angry and helpless. He knew that he was deceived by his boss. He urgently needed the money, but now he could only watch the boss take away the fruits of his labor. He tried his best to suppress his anger and beg the boss to give him more money. But the boss ignored him and just stared into his eyes and said, "This is none of my business." His words were like a knife, piercing Peter's heart fiercely. Peter knew that he was deceived, and he could only turn around and leave. When he left, a robber happened to pass by him. While Peter was waiting for the elevator, he subconsciously looked inside the room. The room was in chaos, and it was obvious that a fierce robbery had taken place. He saw the boss being knocked to the ground by the robbers and his wallet was taken away. Although Peter was a little shocked, he felt more of a complicated emotion. He had just been deceived by his boss, and seeing his boss being robbed, he actually felt a sense of inexplicable pleasure in his heart. So when the boss asked him to stop the robber, Peter ignored it and just watched the robber get off the elevator. When the boss covered his head and questioned Peter, "Why didn't you stop him and let him escape now?" Peter used the words the boss had said to him, "This is none of my business." Then the boss could only stare at Peter with an indignant look. Peter looked at the boss's appearance and secretly cursed in his heart that he deserved it. What he didn't know was that it was because of his decision that he almost lost his uncle. The police officer stopped him. Just when Peter was about to go back to the place where he had been in the morning to wait for Uncle Ben. He found a large crowd of people watching in front of him, and Peter walked forward curiously. Peter felt uneasy, and then he walked forward quickly and pushed away the crowd. He walked to the first row and was stopped by the police officer. Peter looked closely and roared, "That's my uncle." Then he broke free from the police's hands and knelt on the ground to check Uncle Ben's body. Peter turned his head and asked the police in a crying voice, "What is going on?" Peter couldn't understand why his Uncle Ben was lying here. The police calmly replied, "He was shot by the carjacker. We have called an ambulance and they are on the way." Peter's eyes widened after hearing this, and he couldn't believe that his dear uncle would be robbed. "Uncle Ben, Uncle Ben." Peter cried and called Uncle Ben's name, trying to wake him up. The next second, Peter found that he and Uncle Ben were no longer on the street, but in a room, and Uncle Ben was lying on the bed. Everything in the room seemed so strange, which made Peter panic. He looked around, trying to find a trace of familiarity, but it was all in vain. "So, didn't I tell you to think about your decision carefully?" A steady voice sounded in Peter's ears. He turned around and saw Chen Yi standing at the door of the room with an indescribable expression on his face. Peter's anger broke out instantly, and he stood up and punched Chen Yi. He asked, "What did you do to Uncle Ben? Who are you? What do you want to do?" Every question he asked was full of tension and anxiety, and he was eager to know the answer. Peter didn't care why he was here. The first thing he cared about was whether Uncle Ben was alive or dead. That was Chen Yi, who easily dodged Peter's angry punch with an elusive smile on his face. He spoke slowly, with an irresistible force in his voice, "Are you sure you want to hit me? No one can save your Uncle Ben except me. As for where this is of course where I live." Chen Yi would not tell Peter that in order not to attract attention, he carried them back one by one with fast movement, which somewhat affected his style. Chen Yi vowed to learn the mirror space next time. After hearing what Chen Yi said, Peter knelt on the ground and cried and begged Chen Yi, "Yes, you must have a way to save my Uncle Ben, right? I'm sorry, please save him. As long as you save him, I can do anything you want me to do." Peter believed that Chen Yi in front of him had the ability to bring him to this place without anyone noticing, and maybe he also had some kind of superpower, and maybe he could save Uncle Ben. Chen Yi looked at Uncle Ben lying on the bed and slowly said to Peter, "You know, Uncle Ben could have survived if you had stopped the robber from getting off the elevator. This tragedy would not have happened." After hearing what Chen Yi said, Peter seemed to be struck by lightning and stayed there. He couldn't believe that his negligence had caused such a consequence. He covered his heart with his hand, and it felt as if it was torn apart. Then, Peter's tears fell like beads from a broken string, and he kept kowtowing, his voice filled with endless pleading, "Please, Chen Yi, save my uncle. I know I made a mistake, and I am willing to bear all the consequences as long as you can save him." Peter's heart was filled with guilt and pain. He knew that it was because of his negligence that Uncle Ben was shot. And now, his most urgent wish is to let Chen Yi help him. In his eyes, Chen Yi seemed to be the only life-saving straw. Chen Yi looked at Peter crying bitterly, but there was no pity in his eyes. He spoke coldly, with a hint of indifference in his voice, "Isn't it better without Uncle Ben? No one will nag you anymore, and you can do what you want to do." Peter listened to Chen Yi's words, and his heart was like being cut by a knife. He kept kowtowing, and tears and sweat intertwined together, forming a bleak picture. He begged with all his might, "No, I need Uncle Ben, I can't live without him. I know I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Chen Yi, I beg you, please save him." However, Chen Yi remained indifferent. He glanced at Peter indifferently, then he said coldly, "People always learn to cherish after losing something. This is none of my business." After saying that, he turned and left the room, leaving Peter kneeling on the ground alone, crying helplessly. After closing the door, Chen Yi smiled, and then threw the horse charm to Deadpool, who had been eavesdropping. After all, Chen Yi has this ability, and he doesn't want to see Uncle Ben, a good man, die in front of him. The Uncle Bens in the multiverse are almost dead. Chen Yi is really unconvinced and wants to save one to see. Does it have to sacrifice Uncle Ben alone for Peter to awaken? Chen Yi thinks the answer is no. So Chen Yi used the horse charm on Uncle Ben as soon as he saw Uncle Ben. As for why he didn't use the magic beans, it was because Chen Yi only had 2 left now, so of course he had to use them sparingly. As for why he didn't tell Peter, on the one hand, it was because Chen Yi wanted to teach Peter a profound lesson. On the other hand, Uncle Ben, who had just recovered, was also resting, so let this guy embarrass himself in front of Uncle Ben. Deadpool had been leaning against the wall listening and whispered, this kid is crying so miserably, Chen Yi. I really want to go in and take some photos of him. Peter looked at Uncle Ben lying on the bed in despair, his heart full of regret and self-blame. He remembered the familiar words, "This is none of my business." It was because of this sentence that he let the robber go, which indirectly led to Uncle Ben's injury. "I'm sorry, Uncle Ben," Peter said, grabbing Uncle Ben's hand with great regret. Just as Peter was immersed in deep sadness, an old and familiar voice suddenly sounded in his ears, "Peter, I'm fine, don't cry." Peter was stunned. He thought it was his hallucination. He looked up and saw that Uncle Ben, who should have been lying there and left quietly, slowly opened his eyes. Peter's eyes were full of surprise and joy. "Uncle Ben, are you okay?" He almost couldn't believe his eyes. He thought he had lost Uncle Ben, but now Uncle Ben was in front of him. Although his face was pale, he was indeed alive. Uncle Ben smiled and shook his head. "I don't know, it seems that someone rescued him." Although his voice was weak, it was full of gratitude and relief. He himself thought that he would die this time, but he didn't expect that he could wake up. Peter was relieved when he heard this, and the big stone in his heart finally fell. Peter turned his head and looked outside the door, as if he saw Chen Yi's figure. His heart was full of gratitude, but also full of doubts. He wanted to know how Chen Yi saved his uncle. What kind of person is he? Uncle Ben seemed to know what Peter was going to do, and said slowly, "Go, kid. Thank him for me." Peter nodded. He knew that he needed to find Chen Yi, thank him, and answer the doubts in his heart. When Peter walked out of the room, he saw a strange man in a red tights standing at the stairs, whistling briskly, as if he was completely immersed in his own world. Peter was slightly stunned. This scene was indeed a little unexpected for him. Peter greeted the strange man awkwardly. The man turned his head and showed a bright smile, with a bit of cynicism on his face. Deadpool saw Peter very familiarly hug Peter, and then pointed at himself with his thumb. "I tell you, your Uncle Ben survived all thanks to my horse spell." His tone was full of pride. "Young man, remember that my name is Deadpool. You can also call me Handsome. I personally think that the name of Handsome is more suitable for me." Peter smiled awkwardly at Deadpool and thanked him. "Thank you for saving my uncle. My name is Peter Parker." Although Peter did not know the guy who called himself Deadpool and was very curious about his relationship with Chen Yi, he probably saved Uncle Ben for Chen Yi's sake. Peter did not think that he had any ability to let this stranger save people for no reason. After hearing Peter's name, Deadpool's expression became extremely surprised, and his jaw almost dropped. He looked at Peter with excitement in his eyes, and then made a gesture of spraying spider silk. "So you can do this, right?" Deadpool asked Peter, his tone full of expectation. Peter was stunned by the question. He looked at Deadpool's gesture and suddenly understood something. He also made the same action of spraying spider silk, and a powerful force surged from his wrist, forming a thin spider silk. After seeing this scene, Deadpool smiled with satisfaction. He didn't expect to meet another guy named Peter Parker in this universe, and the other party also has the same ability as Miles. I don't know if Peter, who always shouts to be a superhero in his universe, will become Spider-Man like him in the future. Peter was very curious about Deadpool knowing that he had superpowers. He felt that since he got superpowers, everyone seemed to know about it. Whether it was the previous Kamen Rider, the Deadpool in front of him, or even Chen Yi, they all seemed to know his superpowers. This made him eager to know the answer. Deadpool looked at Peter's curious face, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He asked, "Do you want to know why I know you can do this?" Peter nodded after listening, his eyes full of desire. However, Deadpool did not tell him the answer directly. He paused, then said in a joking tone, "I won't tell you. If you want to know, go find Chen Yi yourself. I still want to pick up girls. Bye." As he said that, he pulled his right eye with his fingers and stuck out his tongue to make a funny gesture for Peter to see. Then, he turned and jumped out of the window, leaving Peter standing there alone. Peter looked at Deadpool's back speechlessly and rolled his eyes. He couldn't help thinking in his heart, are all the people here of this character? However, he didn't have time to delve into this question. Because his heart was full of desire for answers at this moment, he decided to find Chen Yi to ask clearly. Then just as Peter was about to go downstairs, Deadpool climbed up from the window again. Deadpool put his hands against the window and asked Peter, "By the way, do you also have an Aunt May by your side, a beautiful lady in her 30s who still has charm?" Deadpool was thinking about his own little calculations in his heart. He suddenly thought that if they were both Peter Parker, there might be an Aunt May. If I didn't get to date Aunt May in that universe, maybe I can try in this universe. This thought made Deadpool's eyes flash with a cunning light. Although Peter didn't know why Deadpool asked this question, he still answered honestly, "Yes, I was raised by Aunt May and Uncle Ben, but if I remember correctly, Aunt May is already in her 60s. Maybe you recognized the wrong person." Peter's tone was full of affirmation. He didn't think he would remember Aunt May's age wrong. How could Aunt May with white hair be a lady in her 30s? Hearing Peter's answer, Deadpool's face flashed with disappointment. He originally thought that he could find a new one in this universe's goal, but he didn't expect Aunt May to be much older than he thought. Then, Deadpool disappeared outside the window again. Peter looked at the direction where Deadpool disappeared, and his heart was full of confusion. He didn't understand why Deadpool suddenly mentioned Aunt May, nor why Deadpool was disappointed with Aunt May's age. But Peter didn't pay too much attention. Now he should go downstairs to find Chen Yi. Just as Chen Yi was talking to Dr. Octopus about the future development of Hell's Kitchen School, he saw Peter coming downstairs. Chen Yi stopped talking with Dr. Octopus and smiled at Peter. "Come down." Peter walked up to Chen Yi, his eyes full of gratitude and respect. He bowed deeply and said sincerely, "Thank you for saving my uncle. And, I'm sorry." Peter's, "I'm sorry," was said to Chen Yi. Before, Peter had mistakenly thought that Chen Yi was capable but unwilling to save his uncle, so he was dissatisfied with him. However, as things developed, Peter gradually realized his misunderstanding and felt deeply guilty. He waved his hand, signaling Peter not to worry. Then he heard the system prompt. "Congratulations to the host, Peter Parker, Toby version, friendship has been upgraded to 2 stars. Congratulations to the host. Congratulations to the host, Peter Parker, Toby version, favorability has been upgraded to 5 stars. Congratulations to the host, you have obtained the attribute, Spider Sense. Do you want to merge immediately?" "Yes," Chen Yi answered immediately. Dr. Octopus, who was standing aside, seemed to have deep emotions in his eyes. He looked at Peter and said with a complex emotion, "Hey, Peter, long time no see. You look younger and more energetic now. Keep it up, you have always been a good boy." Dr. Octopus' words were full of expectations and care for Peter, and his eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, as if he was recalling their past. He may have remembered the scene of their first meeting, when Peter was still a curious and passionate teenager. They explored the mysteries of science together and pursued endless knowledge. Or, he remembered the moment that made him feel heartbroken. He chose to jump into the river in front of Peter and committed suicide. The determination and helplessness at that moment. But Dr. Octopus was still very happy to see Peter again. Peter seemed to be numb to everyone knowing him, and greeted Dr. Octopus. "You seem to know me too, have we met before?" Peter couldn't help asking. Every word of Peter revealed his inner doubts and anxiety. Peter's mood was extremely complicated, and his mind was full of questions. These questions were like crazy growing vines, entangled in his heart. He wanted to know the truth of all this. He wanted to know why everyone knew him. He was just an ordinary high school student. How could he attract so many people's attention? Chen Yi seemed to see Peter's doubts and said slowly, "Don't worry, not only do we know you, but there is also someone who knows you and wants to see you." Peter looked at Chen Yi with doubts and asked, "Who is it?" Just then, a pile of sand suddenly appeared in front of Peter. These sands should not appear in the living room, but they seemed to have life, slowly condensing together and gradually forming a human figure. The old man was very happy. "Long time no see, Peter. I'm the Sandman." William Baker, the Sandman who condensed from sand into a human form, spoke slowly, with an indescribable vicissitude in his voice. Peter Parker looked at the Sandman in confusion, with curiosity and surprise flashing in his eyes, and then turned to look at Chen Yi again. "Wow, another person with superpowers, so why does he know me too?" Chen Yi smiled, as if he saw through Peter's doubts. He explained, "Why don't you let the Sandman answer you? He also contributed to saving your uncle." Peter couldn't help but feel ripples in his heart when he heard Chen Yi's words. Although he didn't know who the Sandman in front of him was, after all, he had saved his Uncle Ben. This kindness made him feel good and grateful for the Sandman. The Sandman looked at Chen Yi gratefully. He didn't actually do anything. This Sandman was also a Sandman from a parallel universe. When he learned that he had come to another universe, he immediately found himself in this universe. Then he gave a sum of money to let himself in this universe take the money to treat his daughter, thus avoiding the fate of killing Uncle Ben by accidental discharge. But for some reason, when the Sandman arrived at the scene, Uncle Ben still couldn't escape the fate of being killed by accidental discharge and fell to the ground. The Sandman was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. He had obviously changed his fate, so why did Uncle Ben still die? Just as the Sandman was about to step forward to help, Chen Yi appeared and made a deal with him. Chen Yi did not expect to meet the Sandman in this universe. Chen Yi immediately determined that he was from another parallel universe, because according to the timeline, the Sandman would transform into the Sandman only after he had finished his jail term. The Sandman was originally a street gangster. During a jailbreak, in order to escape the police's pursuit, he accidentally broke into the desert nuclear bomb test area in Georgia. In the desert, he was affected by nuclear radiation and merged with the sand to become the Sandman. As for why he was in jail, Chen Yi said that he was the murderer who killed Uncle Ben. Seeing the Sandman, Chen Yi had some ideas in his mind. Maybe he could also pull this Sandman into his team. After all, the Sandman also joined the Avengers for a while, although he later withdrew from the Avengers because of different ideas. Chen Yi was not worried that the Sandman would do something harmful to the world, because he knew that most of the people in the land of Hell's Kitchen were more evil than the Sandman. He believed that as long as the Sandman was given the right guidance and restraint, he would become a sharp weapon in his hands. So Chen Yi traded him to join Hell's Kitchen in exchange for saving his daughter and Uncle Ben in this universe. Sandman looked at Peter with deep guilt and relief, and that complex emotion seemed to reveal his inner world. His low voice echoed in the air, as if carrying a heavy past. In a sense, I am the murderer of your Uncle Ben. Peter's heartbeat accelerated instantly, and his anger burned like a burning flame. However, Sandman's next sentence made him fall into deep doubt, but I didn't mean it. I was ready to give up the idea of carjacking after hearing Uncle Ben's advice, but I didn't expect the gun to go off later, causing your Uncle Ben to die. Although I have explained it once, and the other you has forgiven me. But I still have to say it again. Sandman added. Uncle Ben is not dead, and what about the other? I have forgiven him. Peter doesn't know if he has seen such a person before. If Peter really saw it himself, he would definitely have an impression. After all, the Sandman has a murderous aura, and it is hard not to have an impression. Chen Yi looked at Peter's confused expression and knew that the Sandman's expression did not make Peter understand clearly. He decided to explain it himself, so he slowly said, Peter, do you know the concept of parallel universe? Although Peter usually looks a little silly, his IQ is very high, even comparable to Mr. Fantastic. Under Chen Yi's guidance, he instantly thought of the concept of parallel universe. His eyes widened, and he pointed at Chen Yi and the others in surprise. Are you people from parallel universes? Chen Yi nodded and said seriously, yes, we are all people from different parallel universes. But they and I are not from the same place. He paused, as if looking for the right words to explain this complex concept. Finally, he said, you can imagine that we are all guests from different worlds, and we all happen to come to your universe as guests. As for why they know you, it's because they have been enemies with you for various reasons. In other words, they are all your enemies. Peter felt embarrassed after hearing what Chen Yi said. He didn't expect to get to know his enemies again in this way. However, he also felt an inexplicable excitement in his heart. This means that in other parallel universes, he has become very powerful, and may even have become a superhero. Peter looked at Chen Yi and asked in confusion, are you too? Chen Yi knew what Peter was going to ask, and smiled softly and replied, you are not worthy of being my enemy, with your skills. Any one of us can subdue you. Quote. Chen Yi was telling the truth. Peter couldn't beat any of his family members after they were strengthened by him. After hearing this, Peter scratched his head awkwardly, his eyes full of longing for parallel universes. Then can I go to other parallel universes like them? Peter asked Chen Yi. Chen Yi's expression became serious, and he said to Peter, don't think that traveling through parallel universes is a good thing. Next, I will tell you the real purpose of my coming here. In the next half an hour, Chen Yi explained to Peter in detail why he came to this universe and the challenges he would face. Peter was stunned. He had never thought that his world actually hid such a huge secret. He felt unprecedented pressure because he knew that the universe he was in was also facing the same crisis. What should I do next? Peter asked eagerly, his face full of worry and anxiety. He realized that he had a great responsibility and had to work hard to save the universe. Peter did not expect that his universe was facing such a huge crisis. If one was not handled well, the universe he was in would be destroyed. For himself, for Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and for Mary. Peter had to save the universe no matter what. Chen Yi took a sip of tea gently, and his eyes became deep and firm. He spoke slowly, and his voice revealed trust and strength. You just need to do what you have always wanted to do, Peter. We will bear the rest together. What is it? Peter asked, puzzled. At this time, Peter was not in the mood to do what he wanted to do. Saving the universe was the most important thing. Punish the good and eliminate the evil, and be a superhero. Chen Yi answered firmly. Chen Yi believed that as long as Peter appeared in this universe as Spider-Man, the remaining villains in the parallel universes would come out consciously. The fire broke out, and the fire was in chaos. On a sunny afternoon, a shrill alarm suddenly sounded on a busy street in the Big Apple. People stopped to watch, and saw thick smoke and flames in the sky in the distance. It was obvious that a building had caught fire. The fire was fierce, and the flames seemed to devour everything. The atmosphere at the scene was extremely tense. The fire truck roared in, and the firefighters quickly got off the car to start firefighting and rescue operations. They wore heavy protective clothing, oxygen masks, and rushed into the fire scene in the heat and smoke. However, the fire was too big, and the firefighters could not get close to the source of the fire, so they could only extinguish the fire from the periphery. At this moment, exclamations suddenly came from the crowd at the scene. Everyone looked up and saw a figure wearing a red tights and a mask, passing through the crowd like a flash of lightning and quickly flying towards the fire. This is the Spider-Man who has recently become famous in New York. Since Peter listened to Chen Yi's words, he has been crazy in the Big Apple City these days to punish evil and promote good. Peter turned into Spider-Man at the fire scene, and his appearance surprised and gratified everyone present. He first used his spider silk skills to quickly shuttle between buildings to find trapped rescuers. In another corner of the fire, a young woman was trapped in the thick smoke. She screamed in fear, and her voice was full of despair. Peter heard her cry for help and immediately flew in her direction. He crossed the sea of fire, avoided the fallen beams and burning walls, and finally came to the woman's side. He stretched out his strong arms, hugged her tightly in his arms, and then used spider silk to send her out of the fire safely. Peter did not stop the rescue. He continued to go deeper into the fire scene to look for other trapped rescuers. With his help, one trapped person after another was successfully rescued. The firefighters were also infected by his heroic behavior. They worked harder to put out the fire and fought together with Spider-Man, and finally controlled the fire within a controllable range. After nearly an hour of intense rescue, the fire was finally completely extinguished. Peter also successfully completed his rescue mission and rescued all the trapped rescuers. Seeing Spider-Man suddenly appear, like a shining star across the sky, the media's enthusiasm was immediately ignited. Countless camera shutters were pressed, vying to capture the heroic figure of this brave Superman, hoping to become an exclusive headline. Flashes came and went, like bright stars, illuminating the entire city. Peter couldn't help feeling a little proud when he saw this scene. After all, he was still young, and he was very happy to be noticed and admired by everyone. He easily posed in several handsome poses and took photos with the media. Mr. Spider-Man, why do you appear frequently in people's sight recently? Do you have superpowers? What do you think about the popular star Taylor being your fan? Why are you called Spider-Man? Don't you think spiders are disgusting? When the reporters took the photos and picked up the microphone to interview Spider-Man, Peter was still a young man after all, and he was very happy to be praised, but he also knew that he could not reveal his identity. So Peter deliberately said to him in a relaxed tone, "I am your good neighbor Spider-Man, goodbye." After that, Peter did not stop. He quickly fired spider silk and stuck to the tall building. His body jumped up, like a real spider, and disappeared lightly in the sea of people, leaving the media stunned and amazed. It feels so good to be a hero. Peter cheered in his heart. He enjoyed the pleasure of flying in the air and felt the admiration and love of people. This feeling made him feel as if he had become the guardian of the city, full of a sense of mission and accomplishment. However, Peter did not notice that among a group of reporters, there was a pair of eyes staring at him with hatred. The owner of these eyes was Venom Eddie. He was also a reporter and a colleague of Peter from another parallel universe. He lost everything because Peter exposed his fake photo. He blamed all this on Peter, thinking that he had ruined his life. "I thought you didn't exist in this universe, Peter," Eddie thought fiercely in his heart. "Soon I will let you know what it means to be ruined. Let you taste the pain I went through." He was full of resentment and desire for revenge against Peter, and vowed to make this so-called hero pay the price. Spider-Man, this name has recently been like a shining star in New York City, shining brightly, attracting great attention from the general public and the media. With his extraordinary abilities and fearless spirit, he has become a beautiful landscape in New York City, and various media reports have emerged, telling about his heroic deeds. This of course attracted the attention of his old rival, the Green Goblin. On the top floor of the Osborn building, the Green Goblin has completed the recontrol of the Osborn group. At this time, the Green Goblin was drinking black tea elegantly and looking at the newspaper in his hand. The headline of the newspaper clearly read the report of City Hero Spider-Man, and the Green Goblin looked into the distance with a sinister and vicious look. "It's time to find our little spider." Quote, when the Green Goblin first saw the report about Spider-Man, he was also very surprised. He didn't expect that there would be Spider-Man in this world. But later he thought carefully, since there is the Osborn group in this world, it is not so strange to have Spider-Man. It just gave him a chance to take revenge on Spider-Man. The Vulture on the side heard the Green Goblin's words and slowly walked forward. "I can't wait to find Spider-Man. Let him try the equipment I just upgraded." The Vulture was very glad that he cooperated with the Green Goblin in front of him. Although the Green Goblin was not a good person, with the support of the funds of the Osborn group, the Vulture completed the weapon upgrade. The current Vulture felt that if he met the previous Spider-Man again, he said that he could beat 10 of them. "As long as Spider-Man is killed, no one in this world can stop me," the Green Goblin said arrogantly. The Vulture on the side looked at the Green Goblin vigilantly after hearing what the Green Goblin said. Once Spider-Man died, his alliance with the Green Goblin might collapse instantly. After all, based on his understanding of the Green Goblin, he might be the next guy to be killed. So the Vulture also prepared a killer to deal with the Green Goblin. But for now, they still have to deal with Spider-Man together, so the Vulture asked, "Do you have any plans to attract Spider-Man? And what about the Masked Rider?" The Green Goblin took out 2 photos and said calmly, "As long as these 2 guys are caught, Spider-Man will come naturally. As for the Masked Rider, he hasn't come out for a long time. When the time comes, we will get rid of Spider-Man first, and then join forces to get rid of the so-called Masked Rider." If Peter saw these 2 photos, he would definitely recognize that the 2 photos were his good friend Harry and his goddess Mary. After a long time, the 2 of them were very happy. Peter returned home, feeling relaxed and expectant. His cell phone suddenly rang. It was a text message alert. Peter curiously checked and found that it was a date message from Goddess Mary and a message from Harry inviting him to visit his home. Peter saw Harry's invitation and didn't have too many doubts. After all, Harry has always been his good friend, and their friendship is deep. Harry often invites him to visit, and they chat, play games, and share life trivia together. The door of Harry's house is always open to Peter, and Peter never feels anything wrong. However, when Peter saw the date message from Goddess Mary, his heart was filled with joy. Peter never thought that his life would become so lucky since he became Spider-Man. He never dared to hope that Mary would take the initiative to ask him out, but now, this surprising news is right in front of him. Peter's heartbeat accelerated, his cheeks flushed slightly, and he had never thought that this might be a scam. Peter looked at the 2 text messages and hesitated for a while. He wanted to go to Harry's house and meet the goddess Mary as soon as possible. He knew that he should go to Harry's house first, and then go on a date with Mary. So he left home in a hurry and went to Harry's residence. However, when Peter arrived at Harry's house, he found that something was wrong. Harry's house was dark, and the lights were not turned on at all. Peter walked up in confusion and prepared to knock on the door, but found that Harry's door was not locked. Peter felt uneasy. He gently pushed the door open and walked in. The house was silent, with only the moonlight outside the window sprinkled on the floor, which seemed a little deserted. Peter called Harry's name several times, but there was no response. He looked around and found that the house was in a mess, and it seemed that something had been turned over. Peter's heart began to beat rapidly, and he realized that this might not be a simple invitation. Peter gently pushed open Harry's door, and the scene in front of him stunned him instantly. Harry was tied tightly to the ceiling, his face was pale, and he had obviously fallen into a coma. Peter's heart was instantly filled with fear and anger, and he immediately began to look for tools to rescue Harry. However, just as he was concentrating on finding rescue tools, a strong cold wind suddenly blew from behind. Peter turned his head sharply and saw a figure in a green battle suit looming in the moonlight. He had a cunning smile on his face, and the weapon in his hand flashed with cold light. Peter's heart sank suddenly, and he knew that he had been attacked by surprise. However, he did not retreat, but responded quickly. He dodged the man's attack swiftly, and then angrily said to the attacker, "Who are you and why did you hurt Harry?" His voice was full of anger and confusion. He couldn't understand why someone would hurt his friend. The Green Goblin looked at Peter coldly, with a sneer on his lips. "Little spider, I teach my son a lesson." "What's wrong with that?" Peter was shocked to hear this. "You are Uncle Osborne." "No, how do you know my identity?" "You are from another parallel universe." Peter didn't expect to be recognized. After all, he was not wearing a battle suit now. There was only one explanation, that Osborne in front of him was from another parallel universe. However, the Green Goblin didn't give him too much time to think. He said violently, "I'm not that waste Osborne, I'm the Green Goblin. Little spider, let me have a good time with you." Then he attacked Peter. His movements were swift and powerful, like a cheetah hunting prey. Peter did not retreat. He reacted quickly and started a fierce fight with the Green Goblin. Their figures intertwined in the moonlight, and their fists and kicks made thumping sounds in the air. Peter tried his best to avoid the Green Goblin's attacks, while looking for opportunities to fight back. He knew that he could not let the Green Goblin wreak havoc, and he had to rescue Harry, who was tied to the ceiling, as soon as possible. Peter took advantage of the Green Goblin's inattention, leapt up, clenched his hands, and hit the Green Goblin violently. The Green Goblin was caught off guard and retreated repeatedly. Peter took the opportunity to rush to Harry and quickly untied the ropes that bound him. Harry regained his freedom, his face pale but his eyes flashed with gratitude. Harry was successfully rescued, but the Green Goblin did not have any emotions because of this. He stood there with a cold smile on his face, as if the rescued Harry had nothing to do with him. His voice was full of provocation and ridicule. "Now with this burden, do you think you can still beat me?" After that, he stepped on the flying skateboard and rushed towards Peter, so fast that people almost had no time to react. Peter looked at the Green Goblin rushing over, and a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. He knew that it was not wise to fight the Green Goblin head-on with the injured Harry. But he also knew that he could not abandon Harry and put him in danger again. So Peter could only try his best to avoid the Green Goblin's attack. However, the Green Goblin's attack was not without rules. His skateboarding skills were superb, and every attack was like a sharp sword, pointing directly at Peter's vitals. Because Peter wanted to protect Harry, he could only bear many attacks that he could have avoided, so Peter was now covered with scars. The Green Goblin's attack became more and more fierce, and his skateboard drew sharp tracks in the air. Every collision made Peter feel a sharp pain. However, Peter did not give up. He gritted his teeth and tried his best to resist. Harry's heart was full of fear, but he knew that he could not give up at this time. He took a deep breath, used all his strength, and shouted to Peter, "Peter, run away. Don't worry about me. Remember to help me get revenge in the future." His voice echoed in the night sky with a hint of determination and firmness. Peter looked at Harry. His eyes were firm and deep. He knew that Harry was his friend, and his friend was in danger, and he could not abandon him. He stared at Harry closely and replied, "Harry, I will not abandon you. You are my only good friend. How can I watch you fall into danger and ignore it?" Peter's words made Harry's heart surge with a warm current. He did not expect that Peter would so firmly choose to stand with him and face this powerful enemy. His eyes were filled with moving light, and he looked at Peter, his heart full of gratitude and admiration. However, Peter was not shaken by his words. He held Harry's hand tightly, looked into his eyes, and said firmly, "Harry, we are friends, we will not abandon each other. Let us face this enemy together. Whether we live or die, we must be together." The Green Goblin looked at them, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. He thought that the two young people would abandon each other for their lives, but he did not expect that they would choose each other so firmly. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes, but more of disdain and contempt. "Then you will die together. I originally prepared a bigger surprise for you, Spider-Man, but I didn't expect you to be so unappreciative. Then you will die here with Harry." The Green Goblin's words were cold and sarcastic, and there was a twisted smile on his face, as if seeing the death of the two young people could bring him some kind of satisfaction. Then the Green Goblin threw a large number of pumpkin bombs in the direction of Harry and Peter. Harry and Peter looked at each other, their eyes full of despair. They knew that facing the Green Goblin's pumpkin bomb, they had almost no chance of survival. Peter hugged Harry tightly, trying to use his body to block the upcoming bomb for him. Their heartbeats were particularly clear in the silent night, and every beat seemed to tell the passing of their lives. However, just when they were about to die, a voice suddenly sounded. "Why don't you two just stay together?" This voice was like a spring breeze, awakening Peter and Harry from despair. They looked up and saw a young figure slowly walking out of the shadows, with a teasing smile on his face, as if he didn't care about the crisis in front of him. This young man was Chen Yi. The Green Goblin looked at Chen Yi, who suddenly appeared in front of him, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. His original plan was to blow up Peter and Harry, but now there was one more person, which didn't make much difference to him. After all, whether it was to blow up 2 or 3 people, his purpose was the same. However, just when the Green Goblin was about to detonate the bomb, he suddenly found that something was wrong. The bomb that was supposed to fly towards Peter suddenly changed direction and flew straight towards him. He was shocked. What was going on? The pumpkin bomb changed direction because Chen Yi used magnetic control. Boom! The sound of the bomb exploding was deafening. Peter looked at the explosion in front of him and subconsciously hugged Harry to try to resist the impact of the explosion. However, to his surprise, he did not feel any shock wave. He turned his head in confusion and saw Chen Yi using magnetism to control the surrounding steel to form a solid wall to block the impact of the explosion. Peter looked at Chen Yi with envy in his eyes. He exclaimed, "It turns out that Chen Yi also has superpowers." He had always thought that Chen Yi was just an ordinary person, but he didn't expect that he also had such a powerful ability. However, Chen Yi did not respond to Peter's words. He looked at Peter holding Harry tightly with a little teasing in his eyes. Chen Yi thought that these two people were really true love. No wonder Peter disfigured Harry's face in the movie. Harry still stayed with Peter and helped him solve the problem. Peter looked at Chen Yi's expression and felt a little embarrassed. He realized that he might be a little abrupt. After all, Chen Yi's partners all had superpowers, and he himself should have certain strength. He didn't expect that Chen Yi was teasing them in his heart. Harry's eyes were full of envy and unwillingness. He looked at Chen Yi. Although he didn't know him, he could feel the powerful aura emanating from Chen Yi. Harry began to reflect on himself, why he didn't have superpowers, why he couldn't have the power to change his fate like Peter. Harry longed to have superpowers, so that he wouldn't be tortured by the Green Goblin, and Peter wouldn't be hurt because of him. He imagined that if he had superpowers, he might be able to change his fate, or save his father from falling in front of him. Thinking of this, Harry felt a pang of pain in his heart. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to calm his emotions. He knew that reality was cruel, and he couldn't change the past, but he couldn't give up the future because of it. Chen Yi looked at them hugging each other for a long time without separating, and couldn't help pointing at them. How long are you two going to hug each other? Peter and Harry were awakened by his words, and found that they were still hugging each other tightly as if they had just woken up from a dream. Their faces flushed with embarrassment in an instant, and they looked at each other, as if they had thought of something at the same time, and quickly separated. Chen Yi looked at them, a smile on his lips, and said nothing more. He waved his hand, and an invisible magnetic force emanated from his hand, gently moving the steel wall protecting them away. Seeing Chen Yi manipulate the steel so easily, Peter and Harry both showed envious expressions. Peter suddenly disliked his spider ability, thinking that compared with Chen Yi's ability, his ability was simply rubbish. When Chen Yi removed the steel wall, what came into view was the ruins of the explosion, and the Green Goblin lying on the ground, his life or death unknown. Chen Yi did not go forward, but used magnetism to slowly lift the Green Goblin up so that he could see the Green Goblin's condition clearly. Then, looking at the dying Green Goblin, he asked calmly, I heard that you also prepared other gifts for Peter. I wonder if you can tell me what they are. Although the Green Goblin was seriously injured, he heard Chen Yi's words and only managed to pull out an evil smile and said with difficulty, of course it's fun, you'll see it soon. Peter's reaction suddenly became extremely anxious, and a flash of panic flashed in his eyes. Did you also arrest Mary? His words revealed deep concern. Obviously, he was extremely uneasy about Mary's safety. Peter's doubts were not groundless. He recalled everything today. It was obviously impossible for Harry to send text messages while he was tied up, so Mary's situation might be just as bad. After all, Mary was not someone who would easily send him text messages. Faced with Peter's questioning, asked, the seriously injured Green Goblin did not answer directly, but let out a creepy laugh. This laugh was full of ridicule and teasing, as if laughing at their ignorance and powerlessness. Although the Green Goblin did not answer directly, Peter and Harry read the answer from his smile and laughter. Their mood suddenly became heavy, and fear and worry spread in their hearts. Chen Yi did not let the Green Goblin go. He continued to ask, do you know other people who have traveled from parallel universes like you? His words were full of vigilance and seriousness. When the Green Goblin heard this question, he was stunned at first, and then laughed again. This time the laughter was more crazy and unscrupulous. Chen Yi saw that the Green Goblin did not intend to answer his question, and did not continue to ask. He pinched it casually, and the Green Goblin's life quietly disappeared in his hands. Before the Green Goblin died, his first personality seemed to take the lead again. He raised his head with difficulty and said to Harry slowly, Child. I'm sorry. This sentence was full of guilt and regret, as if it was his last farewell to the world. Peter and Harry looked at the Green Goblin's body gradually losing its vitality, and their hearts were filled with complex emotions. Peter was extremely anxious, and the wounds on his body were still aching, but the worry in his heart far exceeded the pain of his body. He struggled to get up and look for Mary, but Chen Yi held him down. Peter, in your current situation, you would have died in vain in the past. Chen Yi's tone was firm and deep, and his eyes were full of concern and determination. Leave the next thing to me. I will bring your Mary back safely and intact, you believe me. Hearing what Chen Yi said, Peter's face turned red. My Mary. My Mary, Peter whispered in a low voice, his voice full of endless worry and longing. Chen Yi said nothing more, turned around and flew into the sky, and began to search for Mary. Suddenly, the screens and TVs in the entire Big Apple City lit up, and citizens stopped to watch. Chen Yi also looked at the big screen, and saw two people in strange costumes appearing on it. Their figures were particularly eye-catching on the screen. Chen Yi recognized them at a glance. They were Vulture and Venom Spider-Man. Venom Spider-Man Eddie spoke slowly, and his voice echoed throughout the city. Hello everyone, I am the future superhero star Venom. Today, I want to play a game with Peter, no, Spider-Man. As his voice fell, a picture of a woman hanging on a bridge suddenly appeared on the screen. Her body was shaking in the air, and it looked like she might fall at any time. And Vulture stood next to her, his eyes full of pride and provocation. You chose to save this lady, Vulture said proudly to the camera. Before he finished speaking, Venom spoke again in another shot, or should we save them? The camera turned and all the staff in the TV station building were tied up in one place, their faces full of fear and helplessness. Chapter 51. The venomous Spider-Man Eddie had a sly smile on his face and said coldly to the camera, "Every 5 minutes, I will eat a hostage, so, Spider-Man, make your choice." After his words fell, the whole city seemed to fall into silence, leaving only his laughter on the TV screen echoing in the air. People watched the situation on TV in horror, and silently prayed for the kidnapped TV station employees. Some of them began to call the police, hoping that the police could rescue the poor hostages as soon as possible. Others silently followed the progress of the incident, hoping that Spider-Man would appear as soon as possible to resolve the crisis. Chen Yi watched this scene on TV with interest. He smiled and thought, this Venom Eddie is quite playful, actually using this method to provoke Spider-Man. However, this is a great opportunity for Chen Yi. Now he doesn't need to look for Mary aimlessly. He doesn't need to make a choice, because he wants to save them all. So, Chen Yi called Deadpool without hesitation and asked him to rescue Peter's goddess Mary. Chen Yi himself flew towards the TV station. Chen Yi quickly crossed the streets and alleys of the city, and his figure flashed quickly in the night. He used his superpowers to easily avoid obstacles and traps on the road and headed all the way to the TV station. 5 minutes seemed to pass in a flash, and the citizens were anxiously waiting for Spider-Man to appear. However, he did not appear as expected. In this tense wait, Venom Eddie's patience gradually wore out. The TV station's live broadcast camera focused nervously on this tense confrontation scene, and the hostages were frightened and pale and trembling. Eddie glanced at them with contempt, and then Venom turned into a tentacle, like a flexible snake, and quickly wrapped around the neck of a TV staff member. He pulled hard, and the staff member was easily pulled in front of him. It seems that Spider-Man will not come. Eddie laughed sarcastically, then, let me show him some color first. As he said, Venom opened his bloody mouth and swallowed the hostage in one gulp, and then said arrogantly to the camera, 5 minutes are up, this is the end of you not coming, Spider-Man, let us wait quietly for the next 5 minutes. The vulture on the other side also flew on the bridge. On the bridge, Mary was hung tightly by a thick rope, her face was pale, and her eyes were full of fear. The vulture sneered and mocked, it seems that your Peter will not come to save you. Mary's heart was like being hit by a heavy hammer, she was surprised and scared. Surprisingly, she never thought that the neighbor Peter, who was always dressed in sloppy clothes and a little cowardly, was actually the legendary Spider-Man. And what scared her was that she had never had any good feelings for Peter, and she never thought that she would fall into such danger because of his identity. She looked up at the vulture, her eyes full of pleading. Please let me go, I really don't know any Spider-Man, I have a boyfriend, and I'm really not familiar with Peter. Her voice was crying, and she just hoped that the vulture would let her go and let her live. Now Mary just wanted to get rid of the relationship as soon as possible, so that she might be able to save her life. However, the vulture ignored Mary's plea, and his face showed a more terrifying smile. He looked down at Mary and said in a joking tone, "Tell me, if you fall from here, can you survive?" Mary heard the vulture's words and looked down at the concrete floor below. It was estimated to be at least 15 stories high, and she would be smashed to pieces if she fell down. Her heart was filled with despair, and she could only keep begging the vulture, "Please let me go, I'll do anything you ask me to do." However, the vulture did not let Mary go because of her plea. On the contrary, he became even more cruel. He looked at Mary with disdain, and then suddenly fired a burst of indiscriminate shots at the ground. The bullets flew in the air, scaring pedestrians on the road to flee. At this time, the police also rushed to the scene and started a counterattack. They surrounded Venom Eddie and the vulture, trying to subdue them with firepower. However, ordinary firepower had no effect on Venom and the vulture. It seemed that their bodies could withstand all attacks, making the police restrain them. There was nothing they could do. Moreover, they each had hostages in their hands, which made the police dare not shoot at will. They were worried about accidentally injuring the hostages, so they could only look for opportunities carefully. However, this passive situation caused the police and special forces to lose a lot of personnel. They were constantly injured in the battle with Venom and Vulture, and some even died unfortunately. Faced with this situation, the citizens were more panicked and desperate. They fled the scene one after another, trying to stay away from this terrible disaster. Venom Eddie's words made the TV station employees present fall into despair. They looked at Eddie helplessly, their hearts full of fear and powerlessness. Eddie enjoyed it. He tried to make people start to hate Spider-Man, and his words were full of provocation and ridicule. "Please remember that you died because of Spider-Man," Eddie said indifferently, as if it was something that had nothing to do with him. His words aroused the anger of the TV station employees, and they began to curse Spider-Man one after another, with resentment and dissatisfaction in their voices. "Spider-Man, you coward, come and save me. Spider-Man, you rubbish, you are not a superhero, why don't you come and save me?" People watching TV also began to feel dissatisfied with Spider-Man. They originally regarded Spider-Man as the guardian of the city, but now, they began to doubt his ability and courage. At this time, Venom Eddie started his feast. He randomly selected a hostage and swallowed him in one gulp. He showed a happy expression on his face, as if he was enjoying this cruel process. However, just as he was about to eat the second hostage, countless steel bars suddenly attacked him. Eddie easily avoided these attacks, but his face became alert. "Who?" he shouted loudly, his voice full of vigilance and anger. "I saw a figure falling from the sky. It was Chen Yi who had just arrived. He was like a god descending from the sky, exuding a mysterious aura." The people on the TV screen and the hostages of the TV station saw this scene and showed surprise expressions. Their eyes were full of expectation and admiration for Chen Yi, as if they saw the dawn of hope. This mysterious hero might be able to save them from the dire straits and bring them a glimmer of hope. In the crowd, there were even children pointing at Chen Yi floating in the air and asking their mothers in a childish voice, "Mom, is this God?" The innocent words of the children made everyone present feel a little warmth and hope, as if they had found a glimmer of hope in this desperate moment. Chen Yi also heard the voice of the child. He turned his head slightly, and a hint of tenderness was revealed in his eyes. He smiled and replied, "You can call me Chen Yi, but I am not God. If you have to have a title, I would rather you call me the Lord of Hell." Chen Yi's words surprised everyone present. They thought Chen Yi was a messenger sent by God to save them, but he called himself the Lord of Hell. However, although his words were surprising, his appearance brought them hope. They believed that no matter who he was, he had the ability to save them from the dire situation. However, for Chen Yi, he didn't care whether they lived or died. He was just an ordinary person from another universe, and his mission was just to get rid of Venom Eddie and then return to his own universe. He didn't have a selfless heart, nor did he have the great ideal of saving the world. He was just a selfish mortal who only cared about his own mission and goals. The two of them were so angry that they had to face each other. Venom Eddie stared at Chen Yi with jealousy. He had been expecting Peter to appear, but he didn't expect to see such an arrogant opponent. This guy who seemed to be ignorant of the world easily took away the attention he had longed for. Venom's heart was filled with cruel murderous intent. He roared at Chen Yi fiercely, "Whether you are God or hell, go to hell." The voice was full of violence and disdain, as if he wanted to cut the enemy in front of him into pieces. At the moment Venom roared, his body pounced on Chen Yi like a cheetah. The hostages on the side saw this scene and showed horrified expressions, reminding Chen Yi to be careful. However, facing Venom's fierce attack, Chen Yi seemed unusually calm. Chen Yi took out a belt in their surprised eyes. "Eternal." As a thick mechanical sound rang out, Chen Yi's body began to emit a dazzling light. After the light dissipated, Chen Yi had transformed into Kamen Rider Eternal. He was wearing a blue and white leather suit, like a ray of sunshine in winter, bringing endless hope to people. And the black cloak, like the brightest star in the night sky, always tightly surrounded him. After the transformation, Chen Yi showed amazing strength. Facing Venom's fierce attack, Chen Yi not only did not show the slightest fear, but instead showed a posture of ease. He easily blocked every attack of Venom, and every resistance seemed to tell Venom that its power was nothing but an ant trying to shake a tree in front of Chen Yi. Finally, Chen Yi launched a counterattack. He kicked out with such force that it seemed to tear the entire space apart. Venom was completely powerless to resist this force and could only watch himself being kicked out. Venom drew a long arc in the air like a cannonball, and finally hit the wall 3 meters away. The huge impact force caused the wall to crack instantly, and Venom fell heavily to the ground under this impact, and was unable to get up for a while. The audience in front of the TV and the hostages at the scene saw this scene and exclaimed and cheered. They looked at Chen Yi, who had transformed into Kamen Rider, in surprise and sighed. I didn't expect that the real identity of Kamen Rider was actually an Asian man. Someone shouted in surprise. We are saved, it's Kamen Rider. The hostages at the TV station saw the appearance of Kamen Rider and instantly ignited hope. They believed that since Kamen Rider was able to defeat Octopus Monster last time, he would definitely be able to save them from danger this time. In the hospital, Harry also saw this scene on the TV screen. He stared at the screen with his eyes fixed, and said with envy, I didn't expect Mr. Chen Yi not only has superpowers but can also transform into Kamen Rider. It's amazing. His admiration for Chen Yi was beyond words. Peter also saw this scene, and he was full of gratitude and admiration for Chen Yi. Gratitude is because Chen Yi turned into Kamen Rider to teach him how to use his spider ability so that he can better protect himself. Admiration is because Chen Yi is brave and selfless. He is willing to risk his life to save others. This spirit makes Peter deeply admire. Venom Eddie slowly stood up, looking at Chen Yi, who had turned into a Kamen Rider, in disbelief. Impossible, how could you be a Kamen Rider? The scene of Chen Yi's complete crushing of Dr. Octopus in the previous fight still appeared in Venom's mind, although he knew that Chen Yi in front of him was very strong. But he believed that after devouring dozens of people, Venom's own strength had also recovered to its peak. Just now I was just careless, I won't make the same mistake again this time. Eddie warned himself in his heart. He decided to challenge Chen Yi again, this time he would be more careful and cautious. So, Venom Eddie cautiously attacked Chen Yi. He tried to consume Chen Yi's physical strength through flexible attacks and fast movements, and look for his flaws. But Chen Yi obviously didn't want to give Venom any chance, and pressed the USB flash drive on his belt. Let's make a quick decision. Chen Yi's voice was low and powerful, full of determination. His right foot began to gather blue flame energy. The flame seemed particularly bright in the night, as if carrying endless power. He suddenly jumped into the air, fell at an astonishing speed, and then performed a flying kick. This night kick was incredibly powerful. Venom Eddie struggled in fear and unwillingness, but eventually ended his life under Chen Yi's powerful force. His roar echoed in the air, full of despair and anger, but eventually turned into silence. The hostages at the TV station cheered when they saw that the enemy who kidnapped them had been solved by Chen Yi. Some of them had tears in their eyes, which was a desire for freedom and gratitude to Chen Yi. The people at the TV station wanted to come over to thank Chen Yi, but Chen Yi had quickly disappeared from people's sight. Chen Yi looked at the dense system prompts. Congratulations to the host. Bank employee A successfully added the host as a friend. Congratulations to the host. Bank employee B succeeded. Chen Yi laughed. It was worth it that he did not transform into a Kamen Rider in advance this time, just to harvest a group of friend points. Anyway, he was ready to return to his own universe, so it wouldn't matter if his true identity was known to others. As time went by, Vulture's patience wore out, and he began to feel impatient with the current situation. He glanced at Mary, who was expressionless beside him, and said coldly, "It seems that Peter doesn't care about you as much as you think. In this case, your existence is of no use to me. So, goodbye, miss." His words were cold and resolute, completely ignoring Mary's desperate shaking of her head and pleading eyes. Vulture raised the gun in his hand without hesitation, aimed at the rope hanging Mary, and pulled the trigger. Bang! With a gunshot, the bullet accurately penetrated the rope and shot it off. Mary's body lost support and began to fall freely from the 15-story bridge. At that moment, Mary closed her eyes, her heart filled with despair. She waited for death to come, waiting for the moment when her body touched the ground. However, just as she was about to touch the ground, a figure suddenly flew up from below and hugged her tightly. This sudden change made Mary open her eyes in surprise. She saw the man in red tights, and his voice was a little teasing. "Madam, you should lose weight. Otherwise, I may not be able to hold you next time." Mary couldn't help but smile bitterly when she heard this. She looked at the man in front of her, and her heart was full of gratitude. She knew that she was saved. When Deadpool safely put Mary on the ground, he turned around and grabbed the double knives, ready to attack the Vulture. Mary looked at the man in red tights who saved her and said shyly, "Excuse me, what is your name? You saved my life, how can I repay you?" Although she didn't know what the man under the mask looked like, for an adolescent girl, she always had a romantic vision of heroes. At this time, Mary thought she had met her true love. Deadpool was indifferent to a beauty like Mary this time, and just said slowly, "My name is Deadpool, no need to repay me, I am not interested in green tea." Deadpool himself was also very surprised. The lady in front of him exuded a strong smell of green tea, which made him not want to attack. Deadpool felt that this woman was not as attractive as Aunt May in his universe, so he should leave this little green tea to Spider-Man. At this moment, Vulture suddenly rushed over from the side, his face full of anger and rage. Deadpool was prepared, he quickly dodged the attack of Vulture, and then fought back. The two started a fierce battle in an instant. The Vulture circled in the sky, the light of the laser gun flickered in his hand. He aimed at Deadpool and pulled the trigger. The laser beam cut through the air and rushed straight to Deadpool. However, Deadpool was prepared. He flashed and cleverly avoided the laser attack. Deadpool pointed at the Vulture in the sky and shouted angrily, "Can't you come down and fight me? It's hard for me to fight in the sky all the time." The Vulture heard Deadpool's words and showed a disdainful expression on his face. Flying is its talent and advantage. Why should it give up its advantage to fight Deadpool? So it continued to circle in the air and kept shooting at Deadpool. Although Deadpool was dissatisfied, he had to admit that Vulture's flying skills were indeed superb. He could only keep dodging the laser attack and looking for opportunities to counterattack. While dodging, he muttered, "Since you don't come down, I will shoot you down. This is the first time I shoot such a big bird." After a laser attack, Deadpool rushed towards the Vulture with the help of the rebound force. The double knives in his hands drew silver tracks in the air, as fast as lightning. With one knife, he accurately cut off one of the Vulture's wings. The Vulture screamed sharply, lost balance, and fell from the sky. However, Deadpool did not give the Vulture a chance to breathe. He followed closely and cut the Vulture's neck with a knife. Blood gushed out, and the Vulture's life ended at this moment. Its body fell to the ground with a dull crash. After the battle, Deadpool stood there, with blood on his double knives. He took out a towel from somewhere and began to wipe his two swords elegantly. He stared at the dead Vulture, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. "So, why don't you come down?" Deadpool turned around and glanced at Mary, who was full of admiration, and said to himself, "Done, call it a day. I should be able to go home now." When Deadpool solved the last villain in the parallel universe, the entire Spider-Man parallel universe suddenly showed strange fluctuations. The universe, which was originally filled with a tense atmosphere, seemed to be pulled by some force in an instant, and the originally distorted cracks in time and space began to heal gradually, as if the wound of the universe was slowly closing. At this moment, the Ancient One, who was in retreat, also felt the strange fluctuations from the universe. She frowned slightly, and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. She didn't expect Chen Yi to solve the trouble so quickly, and Strange hadn't had a car accident yet. Master Ji Yi shook her head gently. She hoped that Chen Yi would not cause her any trouble at this critical moment. She knew Chen Yi's ability. He had wisdom and power beyond ordinary people, but at the same time it was full of uncertainty and variables. She was worried that his behavior would break the balance of the universe and bring unnecessary chaos to the world. However, Master Ji Yi also knew that she could not interfere too much with Chen Yi's actions. As a guardian, her responsibility was to protect the peace and stability of the universe, not to restrict Chen Yi's freedom. Spider-Man Alliance Headquarters. In the Spider-Man Alliance headquarters, the atmosphere was extremely tense. The large screen in the center showed an intricate spider web, which was the mysterious power connecting the fate of all Spider-Men. At this moment, the spider web was abnormal, which made people feel worried. Who has tampered with the web again? Why is Uncle Ben in this universe still alive? Spider-Man 2099, whose real name is Miguel O'Hara, pounded the table angrily, and the sound echoed throughout the room. He is Spider-Man from the future, the leader who founded the Spider League and is committed to protecting the web that connects the fate of all Spider-Men. The other Spider-Men stood silently by, not daring to breathe, for fear of angering the leader. They knew that Miguel was so angry not only because of the abnormality of the web, but also because of his own painful experience. Miguel had lost his daughter, and in another universe, he was killed by gangsters. Before his death, his own self in that universe entrusted his daughter to him. He replaced his own self in that universe and became the father of the daughter of that universe. However, this decision destroyed the web and led to the destruction of that universe. For Miguel, the most important person he lost was every spider. Spider-Man's inevitable fate is the web-weaving incident that he will inevitably experience. He couldn't understand why someone would try to change this fate and save Uncle Ben. This was an unacceptable provocation to him. Spider-Woman on the side hurriedly comforted him with a big belly. Recently, there have been more than 1 or 2 abnormalities in time and space. I will send someone to check. Recently, a new female Spider-Man has just arrived. Miguel took a deep breath and tried to calm his emotions. He knew that the most important thing now was to find the culprit who tampered with the spider web. He widened his eyes and said firmly, "The culprit must be found." After speaking, he turned and left the base camp, as if he was ready to go to other parallel universes to look for clues. At this moment, Chen Yi didn't know that he had accidentally caused a lot of trouble again. But if Chen Yi knew, he wouldn't care. Anyway, he was not the culprit, and Miles, the little black guy, was the culprit. Chen Yi's eyes were now fixed on the flashing ring. This should be a signal that he could return to his own universe after completing the mission. Chen Yi first returned to the villa and talked to Dr. Octopus, asking him to prepare to pack up and leave this universe. Dr. Octopus was very excited after hearing this. After all, a brand new universe is very tempting for a scientist, and it is said that there are many beings smarter than him in this universe. Dr. Octopus couldn't wait to exchange technology with them. Then, Chen Yi turned to the Sandman. He looked at the Sandman and said seriously, "In this universe, I have rescued your daughter. You should keep your promise." The Sandman was silent for a while, then nodded, indicating that he would act according to the agreement. He had no worries. After all, Chen Yi was his daughter's savior, and it seemed to be a good choice to follow a powerful person like Chen Yi. Chen Yi also saw from the system prompt, "Congratulations to the host, William Baker's favorability has been raised to 3 stars. Quote. Congratulations to the host, William Shell's favorability has been raised to full stars." After Chen Yi returned to his room, he sat on the bed, crossed his hands over his chest, and his eyes flashed with deep thought. He knew that although his trip to the parallel universe took longer than expected, he also gained a lot. He decided to check his results first to better plan future actions. Chen Yi decided to take stock of his gains before leaving. System, how many friends do I have now? Ding. There are currently 602 family points, 5 family points. There are currently 15 15th family members. Exclusive skills have been successfully upgraded. Exclusive skills. LV2 on your right. The host uses this skill to actively choose to summon 2 family members to the right of the host no matter where they are. Cooldown time, 24 hours. Next upgrade requires 15 20th family members. When Chen Yi saw the system's prompt, he didn't expect that he had accumulated 10 consecutive draws again, and he successfully upgraded the exclusive skill to LV2. At present, Chen Yi can directly summon 2 family members to his side. Chen Yi began to fantasize that if someone really wanted to surround him in the future, he only needed 1 skill to summon all his family members and counter-surround the opponent. Such a scene made him smile proudly. However, Chen Yi frowned when he looked at the 15 family members. If he remembered correctly, during this period, Deadpool, Iron Man, Sandman and Dr. Octopus became family members. No matter how you count, there are only 4 people. Where does the 5th person come from? He immediately checked the detailed information of the system and found out that when he was fighting Venom, Peter Parker, that is, Tobey's version of Spider-Man, also became his family member when he saw Mary being saved. It was just because Chen Yi was concentrating on fighting Venom at that time and did not notice the prompt of the system. Seeing this, Chen Yi smiled with relief. It was worth it for him to come all the way to save Peter's fate. I hope that this Peter will not become so cowardly like in the movie. After all, Tobey's version of Spider-Man is also the first superhero of Chen Yi's youth. The next step is the exciting lottery session. Every lottery is very much anticipated. System, convert my friend points into family points. I want to draw a lottery. Chen Yi said proudly. The exchange was successful. There are currently 11 family points. Do you want to draw? Draw them all. Chen Yi also wanted to see if he could collect them better in other universes. Congratulations to the host for drawing a bottle of senzu beans from Dragon Ball. Congratulations to the host for getting the Intimate Paradise from Naruto. Congratulations to the host for drawing a Lost Drive. Congratulations to the host for drawing Excel Memory. Thank you for your patronage. Thank you for your patronage. Quote. Congratulations to the host for getting the Shining Fruit from Pirates. Congratulations to the host for getting the Tosen Konami template from the God of Death. Congratulations to the host for getting the Ultra Instinct from Dragon Ball. Chen Yi held the reward in his hand, feeling mixed emotions. He was originally full of expectations, thinking that there would be at least 8 or 9 rewards in 11 draws, but he only drew 7, which made him a little disappointed. What confused him even more was that there was a reward called Intimate Paradise. If he really needed a Playboy magazine, there would be no better choice. However, overall, Chen Yi was still satisfied. He didn't have many senzu beans in his hand, and this lottery just replenished a wave. He would never have too many magical things like senzu beans. Although he already had the horse charm, senzu beans were still his indispensable backup resource. The Lost Drive in his hand caught his attention. He already had one, and this time he used Brother A's USB flash drive. Chen Yi thought about it and planned to give this drive to Harry. After all, becoming a common rider is better than becoming the second generation of the Green Goblin. With this drive, Harry can protect himself and others at critical moments, which is a good choice. The Devil Fruit is also in his hand. He has never understood why this fruit is not called the Diamond Fruit, but the Shining Fruit. However, it doesn't matter. He plans to give this fruit to Uncle Jin Bing. Although Jin Bingshu is powerful, he is still an ordinary person in the end. After eating this shining fruit, he will have extremely strong defense, which will make him more strengthen. What Chen Yi was most excited about was the Ultra Instinct in Dragon Ball. This ability is even more powerful than the Haki of Observation Haki. It allows all parts of the body to automatically attack and defend reflexively without the need for brain command. In this way, the reaction speed and movement speed will be greatly improved. More importantly, it can separate the body and consciousness, allowing all parts of the body to transcend instinct to perceive the danger around. This ability is simply invincible. Chen Yi imagined his hair turning silver gray in the future, and a satisfied smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Finally, Chen Yi looked at the Dongxian Yao template and fell into deep thought. Why is it another blind template? Chen Yi didn't have another blind family member around him, but Chen Yi still said to the system. System, use the Dongxian Yao template. The system immediately responded, looking for a family member matching this template for the host. Chen Yi waited quietly, but the result was not satisfactory. Matching failed. Currently, only 10% of the family members have the highest matching degree, which is not enough to fuse the template. The voice of the system echoed in his mind, making Chen Yi feel a little disappointed. Chen Yi was not surprised to see it. Dong Xian was the captain of the 9th Division of the Death God and a pacifist. Chen Yi could think of only one guy who matched the template, and this guy was also from Hell's Kitchen. That was Daredevil, but this guy was not Chen Yi's family member at present. Chen Yi decided to go back and meet Daredevil to see if this guy was to his liking. He had his own principles and bottom line. If Daredevil did not meet his expectations, then even if this card had a powerful ability, Chen Yi would not go against his conscience for it. Chen Yi sorted it out a little, and when Deadpool came back, he could go back to Hell's Kitchen to have a good rest tomorrow. After all, it has been almost a month since I came to this parallel universe, and I still miss home a little. I don't know how Wanda and the others are doing. However, what Chen Yi didn't know was that his rest plan might not be as he wished. Because, when he returns to Hell's Kitchen, there is a big trouble waiting for him. The morning is full of excitement. Hell's Kitchen. Pietro stood at the door of the apartment, stretched his body, looked at the gray sky, and sighed, "It's another boring morning." It has been a month since Chen Yi and Deadpool left Hell's Kitchen for another parallel universe. Although Wanda is still there, she is busy taking over Uncle Jin Bing's business and is often too busy to go home. Pietro is here, except for occasionally helping to look after the store. He only has to play games to kill time. Although he also wants to find something new to do, in this familiar yet unfamiliar city, he finds that he seems to have gotten used to this kind of idle life. At the same time, Master Yi takes his daughter to school every day, becoming a beautiful landscape of the Hell's Kitchen Community School. The community college in Hell's Kitchen has completed the formalities, has completed the enrollment and successfully opened. Although Master Yi was not successful as the dean of the school, he was still optimistic and had a silly smile every day. His daughter was also very popular in the school. Her cleverness and liveliness won the love of her classmates. Dr. Ethan worked as a chemistry teacher in the school. He was passionate about this job and enjoyed it every day. Recently, he also invited a friend to come to Hell's Kitchen to be a teacher. The teacher's name was Adrian Toombs, a doctor of electronic engineering. Dr. Toombs had been looking for sponsors to realize his dream of flying. Uncle Jin Bing agreed to his request on the condition that he needed to teach in the school. If Chen Yi saw this doctor of engineering here, he would definitely be embarrassed. He didn't expect that he had just solved a vulture in a parallel universe, and he didn't expect that the vulture in his own universe would come to be his teacher. After retiring, Uncle Jin Bing became the principal of Hell's Kitchen School. His reputation was known to everyone in the school. Both students and parents were in awe of him and dared not make trouble in the school. Uncle Jin Bing enjoys it every day. In the morning, he goes to school to see students and his child Richard, and in the afternoon, he goes shopping with his wife Vanessa. Good morning, Pietro. Good morning, Uncle John. Parker's voice is brisk and full of vitality. He walks down the stairs of the apartment and greets Pietro and John Wick, the security guard of the apartment. His smile is bright, like the morning sun, illuminating the entire corridor. Parker walked to the door of the restaurant, took out dog food from his backpack, and prepared to feed the dog Deadpool. However, no matter how he called or how he tempted, the dog Deadpool lay on the ground, indifferent, as if he had no interest in the food in front of him. Peter, stop making trouble. Hurry up and go to class. The door of the restaurant opened, and Aunt May came out with a serious expression on her face, scolding Parker. Aunt May is now a waiter and cashier at the Good Luck restaurant. Her work is busy and fulfilling, but she still cares about Parker's study and life. John Wick, who was sitting on the side, watched this scene. He said to Parker in a weak voice, "Deadpool doesn't eat dog food. He only eats human food like us." His voice was steady and powerful, giving people a sense of security. Parker looked at Deadpool, then looked at the dog food in his hand, and muttered unwillingly, "It's obviously a dog, but it has to eat the same food as humans." His words were full of helplessness and confusion, then he shook his head and turned away. Deadpool, who didn't want to argue with the little brat, stood up angrily after hearing Parker's words, and wanted to take out his gun to teach Parker a lesson. Pietro, who was on the side, saw it and quickly stepped forward to comfort Deadpool. "It's just a child, don't be angry, don't be angry." With Pietro's comfort, Deadpool's mood gradually stabilized. He glared at Parker, then sat back down and continued to lie on his stomach. Pietro looked at Parker's back as he left, sighed slightly, and thought, "This kid is so naughty." "John, have you become more lazy recently? Why do you seem to have no interest in anything? You sit here every morning and sit all day. Isn't it boring?" Pietro complained to John Wick dissatisfiedly. The old John, although cold on the surface, at least had some passion for life. He would participate in various activities, showing his unique charm and ability. But now, he seems to be uninterested in anything. Every day, he sits quietly at the door of the apartment like a statue. Mouth. John's black suit is gone, replaced by the white mink he wears every day. His image has changed so much that people can't help but wonder if this is still the John Wick he once was. Pietro looked at John, feeling helpless. There were not many people at home, and he hoped to go out with John and enjoy the fun of life. But John always refused him for various reasons, which made him very disappointed. He wanted John to play games with him, but John still refused. There was a hint of firmness in his eyes, as if he was immersed in his own world. Since John Wick merged with the template of Wolf Stark, the first blade of the God of Death, his personality has become more and more similar. However, John himself does not seem to care about these changes. He enjoys his retirement life, sitting at the door of the apartment as a security guard with a thermos cup every day, watching people coming and going, and enjoying the tranquility and comfort. This is the retirement life I want, how comfortable it is. John rested his right hand on his chin, with a satisfied light in his eyes. He seemed to have found his own way of life, no longer disturbed by the outside world, enjoying his own peace and satisfaction. However, there are always some people who want to break this peace. I saw a burly man slowly walking towards the restaurant. He was wearing a black suit and looked serious, giving people a strong sense of oppression. He walked to John and Pietro, stopped, and asked in a deep voice, "Excuse me, is Mr. Chen Yi at home?" Pietro turned and looked at the man who asked the question. The man's name was Crossbones. Pietro had seen this man 2 or 3 times this month. "Chen Yi hasn't come back yet, it's not that he doesn't want to see you. Didn't I tell you that you can find my sister if you have anything? My sister can make the decision," Pietro said impatiently. When Crossbones heard this answer, his face changed slightly, and a trace of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. He came to win over Chen Yi on the orders of Director Pierce, but he was told that Chen Yi was not at home 2 or 3 times, which made him a little annoyed. He asked coldly, "Then can you tell me where he is?" "It's been almost a month." Pietro shrugged and lied helplessly, "I really don't know where he is. Sometimes he goes out to travel and is gone for several weeks, and I can't contact him." Pietro knew where Chen Yi was, but he couldn't tell others that Chen Yi was saving other parallel universes. If he wasn't someone who had really seen parallel universes, Pietro wouldn't believe what he said. Crossbones was silent for a while, as if thinking about the next move. He knew the importance of Chen Yi and Director Pierce's expectations of him. He couldn't just give up, he had to find a way to find Chen Yi. At this moment, the door of the restaurant suddenly opened, and a figure walked out. It was Chen Yi himself. After seeing Crossbones, he smiled slightly and said, "Excuse me, are you looking for me?" The first time. Chen Yi went to the hospital to visit Harry and Peter early in the morning. When he walked into the ward, the first thing that caught his eye was Peter's energetic figure. As expected of a teenager who got the spider gene, after a night of recuperation, he has fully recovered his vitality, like a spider that has just transformed, ready to go. He laughed and played with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and his optimism and tenacity were touching. However, when Chen Yi turned his eyes to Harry, he saw his lonely and envious expression. He sat quietly on the bed, watching the interaction between Peter and Aunt May, with a hint of complex emotions flashing in his eyes. Maybe at this moment, he thought of his father Osborne. Chen Yi walked to Harry's side and patted him on the shoulder gently. He noticed Harry's expression and knew the struggle and desire in the boy's heart. So he gently comforted him. "It's okay, Harry, everything will be fine. You still have Peter and us." Harry raised his head, tears flashing in his eyes. He looked at Chen Yi, as if he saw hope. Just then, Chen Yi took out a belt and a USB flash drive from his pocket and handed them to Harry. Harry took the belt and USB flash drive, his eyes full of surprise and confusion. Chen Yi explained lightly, "This belt and USB flash drive can turn you into a common rider. Although I can't give you superpowers, you can use this to protect yourself and the people you want to protect. But please remember, if you use it to do evil, I will never let you go." Harry nodded solemnly. He took the belt and USB flash drive, as if he had taken over a great responsibility. He looked at Chen Yi, his eyes full of determination. "I will definitely use it well, Chen Yi." "Thank you." Peter on the side also noticed it and hurried over. Although he didn't say anything, Peter looked at Chen Yi with eager eyes, as if to say that he also wanted it. Chen Yi said helplessly, "Don't think about it, use your spider ability well, your ability is not weak." His words stunned Peter, and then he nodded slowly. He understood that everyone has his own path and mission, and what he needs to do is to maximize his potential. Then Chen Yi smiled and patted Harry on the shoulder, then turned and left the ward. He knew that this boy had found his direction and goal. He will work hard to become a real hero and protect himself and those around him. At this time, the system panel had a new prompt. "Congratulations to the host. Harry Osborne's favorability has been raised to 5 stars. Congratulations to the host. Harry Osborne's favorability has been raised to full stars. Congratulations to the host. 16/20th's family members have been summoned. Then Chen Yi used the hanging ring to return to the Good Luck restaurant. As for Deadpool and others, Chen Yi would use his exclusive skills to summon them back later. Chen Yi had just returned to Hell's Kitchen and had just said hello to Aunt May and was about to go out for some fresh air. He heard someone outside the door looking for him, and then the previous scene appeared. Seeing Chen Yi coming back, John Wick and Pietro's eyes lit up. Pietro quickly took out his mobile phone to report the news of Chen Yi's return to his sister. At the same time, the dog Deadpool also jumped up excitedly. Chen Yi smiled and picked it up, saying lovingly, okay, I'll buy you something delicious later. The dog Deadpool seemed to understand Chen Yi's words and licked his cheek happily. Then Chen Yi had time to deal with the man in front of him. I don't know what your name is, what do you want to see me for? Crossbones looked at the young man in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He originally thought that Chen Yi would be a fierce and muscular man, but the man in front of him looked so ordinary and even handsome. This made him start to wonder why a powerful person like Master Yi would willingly become Chen Yi's subordinate. However, Crossbones did not reveal his inner thoughts. He stretched out his hand and said with a smile, hello, my name is Crossbones, I am the captain of the Special Forces from S.H.I.E.L.D., and I came here on the orders of Director Pierce this time. Chen Yi looked at the hand stretched out by Crossbones and shook hands with him with a smile. However, the moment they shook hands, Chen Yi immediately felt the change in Crossbones' hand strength. The power of that hand surged like a tide, as if trying to test his strength and determination. Chen Yi couldn't help but feel a little funny. He understood that Crossbones was trying to test his strength in details. Chen Yi didn't panic or retreat. He quietly endured the power of Crossbones and secretly observed him. He found that although Crossbones was smiling, the strength of his hands did not weaken at all, but became heavier. However, Chen Yi was not afraid of this. On the contrary, a glimmer of challenge flashed in his eyes. Although Chen Yi was not strong, his body contained amazing power. With the superposition of various talents, his strength was enough to compete with the purple potato spirit. At this moment, he was also gradually increasing the strength of his hands, trying to compete with Crossbones. As time went on, Chen Yi gradually felt the changes in Crossbones. He saw that the other party's face turned red, a redness suppressed by power, a redness that could not withstand pressure. And Crossbones' eyes also lost their previous calmness and confidence, replaced by a kind of shock and confusion. Seeing this, Chen Yi smiled and asked, do you want to continue shaking hands? His voice was relaxed and confident, as if everything was under control. In fact, his question was to test Crossbones, whether he wanted to continue testing his strength. Crossbones took a deep breath, and he knew that he had been completely suppressed by Chen Yi. He slowly uttered a few words. No, it's okay. There was a hint of helplessness and frustration in his voice, but he also understood that this was his recognition of Chen Yi's strength. So you want to talk to me on behalf of Hydra? Chen Yi's voice was low and firm, as if every word contained an unshakable power. When Crossbones heard the name Hydra, his body tensed up instantly, as if he was bound by invisible ropes. His originally relaxed expression became solemn, his brows were furrowed, and his eyes flashed with doubt and uneasiness. This name means too many secrets and dangers to him. I don't understand what you are talking about. Crossbones tried to stay calm, but his voice revealed an unconcealable tension. He was secretly surprised. Did this man already know his true identity? Did he already know the existence of Hydra? Looking at Crossbones, who was still pretending to be confused, Chen Yi sneered in his heart. He knew that this man was not really unaware, but was just testing his background. So Chen Yi decided to give him an answer that he could not escape. Long live Hydra, he said softly but firmly, as if swearing an ancient oath. This sentence was like a flash of lightning, instantly piercing the defense line in Crossbones' heart. His face turned pale in an instant, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He looked at Chen Yi in disbelief, as if he saw a messenger from hell. How do you know? Crossbones' voice trembled, and his heart was filled with fear and uneasiness. He understood that the man in front of him not only knew his name, but also knew his identity, and even knew the mysterious organization he was loyal to. The two of them were so confused that they had to wait for the next day. Are you also? Crossbones looked at Chen Yi in surprise. Chen Yi smiled slightly, as if he saw through Crossbones' thoughts. You must be scared by his aura. He was secretly proud in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He let this Crossbones test him in front of him, and wanted to give him a head start. Chen Yi gently pushed open the door of the restaurant and made a gesture to invite Crossbones in. His voice was gentle and polite. Please, you can't just stand here and chat all the time. Then he turned and walked into the restaurant. Crossbones looked at Chen Yi's back and couldn't help but hesitate. However, he quickly suppressed his composure and followed him in. Inside the restaurant, the lights were soft and the atmosphere was peaceful. Chen Yi looked directly at Crossbones, his voice calm and firm. Tell me what you want, Mr. Crossbones. You Hydra wouldn't come to me for no reason, right? His words revealed a kind of confidence, as if everything was under control. Crossbones looked at Chen Yi, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. He originally thought that the meeting would be more complicated, requiring some courtesy and probing, but Chen Yi's directness caught him off guard. However, such direct conversations are exactly what Crossbones likes. He appreciates men with courage and people who can face the exchange of interests honestly. Crossbones adjusted his sitting posture and said seriously, I am indeed here on behalf of Director Pierce to invite you to join Hydra. You should know that Hydra is an organization with strong strength and resources. Chen Yi nodded slightly. He knew that Hydra did have strength and influence that could not be underestimated. Chen Yi did not refuse immediately, but said lightly, what benefits you can bring to me is what I care about most. Please let me know your sincerity first. Although Chen Yi did not intend to join any organization, he was very curious about what Hydra could offer him. Crossbones took a deep breath and began to explain their proposal in detail. First, we can provide you with financial support, whether it is your personal life or the construction of public facilities in Hell's Kitchen, you can get funding from Hydra. Secondly, the schools and hospitals in Hell's Kitchen do need to be improved, and we can provide you with the necessary resources and technical support to make them look brand new. Hearing this, Chen Yi's heart was shaken. He really didn't need money, but the public facilities in Hell's Kitchen were indeed a pain in his heart. If Hydra could help improve these conditions, it would undoubtedly be a good thing for him. However, Chen Yi did not agree immediately, but continued to ask, so, what price do I need to pay? Crossbones solemnly replied, join us and become a member of Hydra. When necessary, we need you to help us. Hearing this, Chen Yi refused without hesitation, I refuse. Crossbones was surprised to hear this answer. He stood up and his tone became serious. You have to think clearly, Chen Yi. You already know our identity. If you refuse us, you will face the pursuit of Hydra all over the world. However, Chen Yi was not shaken by the threat. He smiled and said, don't be so anxious, Crossbones. Although I can't join you, it doesn't mean that we can't cooperate. Chen Yi's words surprised Crossbones. He didn't expect Chen Yi to make such a suggestion, but he soon realized that this might be a better choice. So, he sat down again and prepared to listen to how Chen Yi would cooperate. Chen Yi continued, I guess you investigated me before you came. Don't you want a transformation device like Kamen Rider? You mean you want to give it to us? Crossbones' eyes lit up when he heard it. If he could transform into Kamen Rider, Crossbones would not be afraid of anyone. Chen Yi shook his head. Not at the moment, because I only have one set. Crossbones was furious when he heard it. He thought Chen Yi was playing tricks on him. He only had one set and he still brought it out. Wasn't he deliberately teasing him? Don't worry. Although I can't give you my set, the organization behind me will give me a few sets in a while. Then I can decide to give Hydra 1 or 2 sets. Chen Yi decided to make up an organization. He knew that the secret of the system could not be leaked to the outside world, and there was someone behind it. A powerful organization can not only divert Hydra's attention, but also make Hydra no longer focus on Chen Yi and Hell's Kitchen. After listening to Chen Yi's words, Crossbones thought to himself that there was indeed a powerful organization behind Chen Yi, and Chen Yi's status in this organization was not low, otherwise he could get several powerful transformation belts like this one, and he could make his own decisions. I wonder if you can introduce the organization behind you. I wonder what the name of this organization is, Crossbones asked tentatively. Chen Yi was stunned when he heard Crossbones' question. He made up an organization casually, so how could he know the name? After thinking for a while, he said, "The organization behind me is called Consortium X. They are all a group of scientists who don't care about the world, so I usually come forward to purchase the necessary supplies on their behalf." Crossbones nodded after listening, and silently wrote down the organization of Consortium X. If they can find Consortium X, they can also strive to be their agent. After all, Hydra is much more advantageous than Chen Yi. Then I'll take my leave first. If you have a transformation device, remember to contact me. This is my phone number. Crossbones handed out a business card and left in a hurry. "No, help me renovate the hospital first," Chen Yi said as he looked at Crossbones, who was leaving in a hurry. Shield. Crossbones hurried into Director Pierce's office and reported in detail what Chen Yi had told him with a serious face. He described in detail the Consortium X mentioned by Chen Yi and the high-tech power they possessed, especially the information about Kamen Rider, which made Director Pierce's eyes light up. Director Pierce sat behind his desk, tapping his fingers lightly on the table, as if thinking about some important decision. He took a deep breath, and then slowly said, "So the force behind Chen Yi is called Consortium X." His voice was full of seriousness and depth. This Consortium X was so mysterious and had such high-tech power, which shocked Director Pierce. He secretly decided in his heart that he must take control of the power of this Consortium X. In this way, the power of Hydra will be even stronger, and it may even surpass all hostile forces. Suddenly, Director Pierce opened his eyes and looked at Crossbones with a sharp gaze. "Chen Yi already knows the identity of our Hydra, right?" There was a trace of unquestionable firmness in his voice. Crossbones nodded, and a helpless expression appeared on his face. He knew that Chen Yi already knew the existence of Hydra, which was undoubtedly a huge threat to them. Director Pierce smiled slightly, and a sly smile appeared on his face. "Since he doesn't join us, let's send our Winter Soldier." His voice was full of confidence and decisiveness. However, Crossbones frowned. Winter Soldier may not be Chen Yi's opponent. There was a trace of worry and uneasiness in his words. After all, he himself had suffered at the hands of Chen Yi, and he knew how powerful Chen Yi was. If the Winter Soldier couldn't even beat him, then he certainly couldn't beat Chen Yi. Director Pierce looked at Crossbones' frown and smiled slightly. "Who said I would send the Winter Soldier to kill Chen Yi? Chen Yi doesn't care much about friends and family, so I sent the Winter Soldier to capture Kingpin's family for me." His voice was full of cunning and insidiousness. After listening to Director Pierce's words, Crossbones suddenly realized. He understood Director Pierce's intention. It turned out that he wanted to use Kingpin's family to threaten Chen Yi and let him hand over the contact information of the transformation device and the forces behind him. In this way, they can control the power of Consortium X and further enhance the strength of Hydra. Director Pierce looked at Crossbones and understood his intentions, and nodded with satisfaction. He reminded again, "You continue to contact Chen Yi, and don't let people know that we kidnapped Kingpin. Do it cleanly." His voice was full of seriousness and warning. After listening, Crossbones suddenly realized and then went out to execute the order. The first time, the second time. Hell's Kitchen, Good Luck Restaurant. Chen Yi sat in the corner of the restaurant, quietly waiting for his friends. Today, he specially invited Kingpin, Tony and others to have dinner together, and there was another important purpose, which was to introduce them to the two newcomers, Dr. Octopus and Sandman. The lights in the restaurant were soft and warm, reflecting the expectation on Chen Yi's face. During this period, the restaurant's business has become more and more prosperous, and the chef team has gradually grown, so Chen Yi no longer needs to cook by himself. Tonight, he can sit here leisurely and wait for his friends to arrive. Just then, familiar footsteps came from the door. Chen Yi looked up and saw Wanda walked in. Her outfit caught Chen Yi's eye. She was dressed in an OL outfit, simple and elegant, and with the gold-rimmed glasses, she looked even more extraordinary, as if a domineering female president had arrived. However, what surprised Chen Yi was that Wanda was accompanied by a little girl. She looked about 13 or 14 years old, dressed simply, and nervously grabbed Wanda's clothes, obviously afraid of the unfamiliar environment. Chen Yi looked at the little girl curiously and couldn't help asking Wanda, "Who is this little girl?" Wanda gently touched the little girl's head, a trace of tenderness flashed in her eyes, and explained to Chen Yi, "Her name is Jessica Jones." Her family had a car accident and was adopted by a pervert. This little guy seems to have superpowers. Not long ago, a guy with a purple body controlled this little girl to come to Fisk building to cause trouble for us, and I beat him away. This little guy is also very pitiful. His family died and he was controlled by others. I was soft-hearted and adopted him. You are still the guardian. Chen Yi. I don't think I am old enough. Perhaps Wanda herself has experienced the death of both parents, so when she saw this little girl, she thought of herself. If she hadn't met Chen Yi, she might be controlled by others like this little girl. So Wanda decided to take in this little girl. After listening to Wanda's explanation, Chen Yi looked at Jessica Jones in surprise. It was another superhero from Hell's Kitchen. The guy with purple all over his body must be the Purple Man. Chen Yi suddenly felt that this place was a shelter, and all kinds of people were stuffed into him. Chen Yi stood up, walked to Jessica, and smiled and stretched out his hand. Hello, Jessica. I am Chen Yi, welcome here. His voice was gentle and powerful, as if it could dispel all fear and anxiety. Jessica raised her head and looked at Chen Yi carefully. Although she was still a little scared, Chen Yi's smile and voice made her feel a little warm and comforted. She hesitated for a moment, then gently held Chen Yi's hand. Chen Yi said to Wanda, "Then did you kill the Purple Man? That guy with purple all over his body?" After listening to Chen Yi's words, Wanda tried hard to recall the previous battle. She frowned, thought for a while, and then said, "I didn't care at the time. I knocked him down and went to check on the little guy. However, even if he didn't die, he should have broken an arm." Her words revealed disdain for the Purple Man. Chen Yi didn't care too much when he heard that the Purple Man was not dead. After all, although the Purple Man has some troublesome abilities, his strength is not strong. The body of the Purple Man is changed by some chemical hormones. Once these hormones are absorbed by the skin, people can be controlled by the Purple Man's words. However, for those with strong willpower, they can break free from the control of the Purple Man. For example, Kingpin once got rid of the control of the Purple Man. Despite this, Chen Yi still plans to find a time to completely kill the Purple Man. He believes that cutting the grass and eradicating the roots is the hard truth, so that the threat brought by the Purple Man can be completely eliminated. Then let this little guy stay here and go to school with Peter and the others. Chen Yi suddenly said. A hint of evil taste flashed in his eyes. Children still have to play with children. His words surprised Jessica and Wanda. After all, Jessica and Peter were high school classmates in the movie story itself. Now Chen Yi just brought him forward, maybe there will be some sparks. Chen Yi is now Jessica's guardian, and Chen Yi will never allow Jessica to marry a black man. Just when Chen Yi and Wanda were chatting, Tony and Kingpin's family just happened to come in. Seeing Chen Yi and Wanda playing with Jessica warmly. After seeing the scene, Tony couldn't help but teased, "Wow, you've only been out for a month, and you already have a child." His words caused laughter from the people around him. King Bing and Vanessa looked at Chen Yi with relief. Wanda blushed when she heard it, stood up and quickly walked to Vanessa to act coquettishly. "I don't have one, this is my newly adopted little girl, and she is also very miserable." Then she told the King Bing couple about Jessica's life experience. It was the first time that Richard saw someone of his age, and he took the initiative to walk over and start chatting with Jessica. The two children soon became good friends, playing games and sharing stories together. Tony stepped forward. "How come you have time to ask me out for dinner today? You know, I'm not particularly interested in Chinese food, I would rather eat cheeseburgers." Tony didn't expect Chen Yi to invite him to dinner. After all, he was very busy recently, upgrading his armor and dealing with the affairs of the Stark Group. Chen Yi hurriedly pulled Dr. Octopus over and introduced him to Tony. "This is Dr. Otto. He comes from a parallel universe that is completely different from ours. He is also a leader in the field of physics and has many amazing research results." He looked at Dr. Otto curiously and found that his eyes also flashed with a desire for knowledge and curiosity about the unknown world. "Drive Otto, this is Tony Stark. He is one of the smartest people in our world. I believe you must have a lot of common topics." Chen Yi introduced Dr. Otto again. Tony couldn't help feeling a little proud when he heard Chen Yi's praise for him, but he quickly suppressed this emotion and changed to a more professional attitude. He extended his hand to Dr. Otto and said with a smile, Nice to meet you, Doctor. I believe we can find new inspiration and breakthroughs from each other's research. Dr. Otto also shook Tony's hand enthusiastically, with excitement flashing in his eyes. The two began to talk, and their topics expanded from their respective research results to the discussion of the entire field of physics. Chen Yi watched the two chatting enthusiastically and felt very relieved. At this moment, Chen Yi noticed that Jin Bing had come over and sat next to Chen Yi. Jin Bing looked at Chen Yi and said with a smile, "Boy, it seems that your journey was quite smooth. Hell's Kitchen is also doing well now." Chen Yi smiled and responded, "You are in charge of Hell's Kitchen. I heard that you have become the principal. It seems that you have a comfortable retirement life." Jin Bing laughed, patted Chen Yi on the shoulder and said, "You should go to the school, after all, they are also curious about the founder of the school." Chen Yi nodded and then took out a devil fruit from somewhere. He handed it to Jin Bing and said, "Uncle Jin Bing, this is what I brought you." Jin Bing looked at the fruit with strange patterns and asked curiously, "What is this?" Chen Yi smiled mysteriously and explained, "This is called a devil fruit. Eating it can give you superpowers. And this fruit is called a shining fruit. After eating it, you can have a body as hard as a diamond." Jin Bing's eyes widened, and he looked at the devil fruit in Chen Yi's hand in disbelief. The old man was very happy. Jin Bing took a puff of his cigar and slowly exhaled a stream of smoke, as if thinking about life. He looked at the devil fruit in his hand, which was flashing with an attractive light. Although this fruit was indeed very useful to him, Jin Bing thought of Chen Yi first. He took a deep breath, looked at Chen Yi, and said, "This fruit is so powerful, why don't you eat it yourself? I'm a retired old man now, and I don't need it." There was a hint of firmness in Jin Bing's words, as if he had made a decision. Chen Yi felt a warm current in his heart when he heard Jin Bing's words. He didn't expect that when faced with such an attractive ability, Uncle Jin Bing would choose to refuse without hesitation, but gave this opportunity to himself. He knew that this was Uncle Jin Bing's trust and love for him. However, Chen Yi did not accept this proposal. He shook his head and said to Jin Bing seriously, "I have enough abilities, uncle. This fruit is specially for you. With it, you can better protect Vanessa and others. The enemies I may provoke in the future will only become stronger and stronger. I can't let you get hurt." Jin Bing looked at Chen Yi's firm eyes and was silent for a while. He knew that Chen Yi was telling the truth, and Chen Yi would definitely encounter stronger enemies in the future. And if his ability was insufficient, he would probably become a burden to Chen Yi. So, he stopped being hypocritical, picked up the devil fruit, and took a bite. Chen Yi looked at Uncle Jin Bing biting off the devil fruit without hesitation, and his heart was instantly filled with tension. He knew the reputation of the devil fruit, and the indescribable taste made many people stay away. So he couldn't help but reach out to stop him and said, "Don't eat so much, it's unpalatable." However, Uncle Jin Bing didn't seem to hear his warning, and chewed the devil fruit in his mouth expressionlessly. He chewed it a few times and then swallowed it, as if it was not something difficult to swallow, but an ordinary fruit. This surprised Chen Yi very much. He widened his eyes and wondered if he had taken the wrong fruit. "Do you want to eat the whole thing?" Uncle Jin Bing looked at Chen Yi and asked lightly. Chen Yi was stunned for a moment, then replied, "No, just take a bite." He couldn't help but ask again, "Isn't this fruit unpalatable?" Uncle Jin Bing heard that he only needed to take a bite, so he put down the devil fruit in his hand. He took a puff of the cigar, and then said melancholy, "When I was a child, I ate things that were 100 times more unpalatable than this in order to survive. This is Hell's Kitchen." Hearing Uncle Jin Bing's words, Chen Yi was silent. He understood why Uncle Jin Bing could eat the devil fruit without any expression, because to him, it was nothing at all. This man who lived in a place called Hell's Kitchen had eaten countless unimaginable things to survive. In comparison, what was the taste of the devil fruit? At this moment, Pietro on the side noticed this strange fruit. He walked over curiously, looked at Chen Yi and Uncle Jin Bing, and then asked, "What kind of fruit is this? I've seen it for the first time." Neither Chen Yi nor Uncle Jin Bing spoke, just looking at Pietro. Pietro looked at their expressions and felt a little strange, but he still decided to try this strange fruit. So he also took a bite, and then the unpalatable devil fruit made his expression instantly distorted. Pietro quickly threw away the devil fruit in his hand, rinsing his mouth and complaining. Phoo, 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 what kind of fruit is this? It's too unpalatable. Chen Yi looked at Pietro's expression, smiled and nodded. This is the reaction of a normal person eating a devil fruit. Chen Yi turned to Uncle Jin Bing and said, Uncle, feel your new ability. Uncle Jin Bing closed his eyes silently after hearing what Chen Yi said. A faint smile appeared on his face, as if he was expecting something. His body began to tremble slightly, as if a powerful force was surging in his body. Uncle Jin Bing's body slowly changed. Half of his body gradually turned into a crystal-clear diamond, and the other half remained normal. The diamond shone brightly under the light, attracting everyone's attention. Vanessa, Tony and others came up and curiously observed this strange phenomenon. Dad, how did you turn into a diamond? Richard asked curiously, his eyes full of admiration and pride for his father. He felt that his father had become even cooler and more powerful. Tony and Dr. Octopus also carefully observed the diamond-turned Uncle Jin Bing, their faces full of shock and disbelief. Tony asked Chen Yi with a shocked look on his face, is this your ability again? He really couldn't believe that Uncle Jin Bing, who was obviously just an ordinary person in his investigation, actually had the superpower of turning into a diamond. Could it be that unpalatable fruit just now? Pietro also asked curiously. He picked up the devil fruit thrown aside and observed it carefully. He thought that he would have such an ability if he took a bite, so he closed his eyes and began to feel it. Chen Yi looked at the surprised expressions of the crowd and smiled without explaining. He took out a knife and said to Uncle Jin Bing, try the strength first. Then he casually slashed at Uncle Jin Bing. With a clang, the diamondized Uncle Jin Bing was unharmed, but the knife broke into 2 pieces. Uncle Jin Bing looked at the scene with satisfaction, and then said, I feel that bullets are useless to me now, and my diamondized strength has been strengthened. He felt as if he had become stronger and indestructible, and could even kill his previous self with a flicker of his hand. Pietro slowly opened his eyes, with a gleam of loss in his eyes. He looked at Chen Yi and asked with a hint of expectation, are there any other devil fruits? I want to eat one too. There was a hint of desire and curiosity in his voice. Tony listened to the conversation between the 2 people on the side, frowning. He felt that the concept of devil fruit had gone beyond the scope of science, so he turned to Chen Yi and asked with a serious expression, what is a devil fruit? His voice revealed curiosity about the unknown and a desire to explore. Chen Yi looked at Tony's serious face, took a deep breath, and began to explain the role and origin of the devil fruit. He described in detail the unique ability of the devil fruit and how it gave the eater extraordinary power. Everyone was shocked when they heard Chen Yi's story. They couldn't imagine that there was such a magical thing in the world that could give people such powerful power. After listening to Tony snatch the remaining shiny fruit from Pietro's hand, he carefully found a bag to put it in. Obviously, he planned to take it back for research. He was full of curiosity about the scientific principles of the devil fruit and hoped to unlock its secrets through research. At this time, Chen Yi interrupted everyone's meditation and hurriedly invited everyone to eat. The family sat in the restaurant, enjoying the food and warm atmosphere. Although they were shocked and curious about the existence of the devil fruit, they were more willing to cherish the happy time in front of them. At the table, everyone talked about various topics, and laughter and conversations came one after another. Chen Yi looked at the happy smiles of his family and felt extremely satisfied. He knew that no matter how the world changes, as long as the family is together, it is the greatest happiness. Chen Yi suddenly thought that something seemed to be missing today. Chen Yi, aren't you afraid that I will take it back? Deadpool, who was still in the parallel universe, kicked over the trash can and complained. Middle East, Hydra's secret base. Crossbones walked steadily towards a huge freezer. His eyes were as sharp as a hawk, penetrating the transparent shell of the freezer and looking straight at the sleeping figure inside. He waved his hand, signaling his men. The man carried out his orders. With a slight mechanical roar, the lid of the cryostat slowly rose, revealing the sleeping person inside. It was a man called the Winter Soldier, who lay there quietly, as if time had no effect on him. There was no expression on his face, only a pair of deep eyes, revealing an indescribable coldness and determination. His long hair looked a little pale under the light of the cryostat, like a mountain covered with ice and snow. Crossbones walked in front of the Winter Soldier, looked down at him, and said coldly, "It's time to work, Winter Soldier." His voice was like an ice knife, cold and sharp. The Winter Soldier slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes met Crossbones, as if two sharp swords collided in the air. The Winter Soldier did not speak, but sat up silently and walked out of the cryostat. Although his movements were slow, they were full of power. The next morning, Chen Yi's eyes slowly opened in the morning light. He felt a fresh air filling the room, as if foreshadowing a new day full of hope and vitality. He quickly got up, tidied himself, and then set out on the walk to Hell's Kitchen School. Chen Yi stood at the school gate, watching the students coming and going listlessly walk into the school gate for security check. Chen Yi walked up and saw that several men arranged by the high table were now standing at the door with AKs. They were currently searching the students, and Chen Yi curiously joined in. Several children of different ages were found to have dangerous items and were standing in the corner waiting for processing. Chen Yi took a pistol from the children and played with it. He asked the white boy in front of him, who was probably about 13 years old, "Why are you carrying a gun in class? What's your name? Which class are you from?" The white boy raised his head and said arrogantly, "Who are you?" "My name is James, and I'm from class 3, grade 8. This is not a real pistol. It's just a lighter." Several security guards from the high table society laughed when they heard it. As killers, how could they not know that this was a real pistol and lied that it was a lighter? Chen Yi also laughed when he heard it, loaded his gun, and then said to James, "Why don't I try to shoot and see if it comes out as fire or bullets?" James looked at Chen Yi in front of him and seemed to be really going to shoot, and began to shout for help to the security guard. "Hurry up, someone wants to kill students. I tell you, this is the school run by the Lord of Hell Chen Yi, no one can kill people at will in his territory." Chen Yi thought it was funny after hearing it, and he put down the gun. James saw Chen Yi put down the gun and thought he was scared, and said triumphantly, "I tell you, this is not a place for people like you to run wild." Chen Yi slapped him, and then kicked him twice. The kid was still a little unconvinced and stared at Chen Yi. "Then don't you know that I am Chen Yi?" Chen Yi smiled and looked at James. Then he turned around and looked at the security guards of the high table club and ordered, "Go build a small dark room for me. If there are any more disobedient guys like this, throw them all into the small dark room for a day or two." Chen Yi walked and thought, whether he was too kind to these guys. He had to talk to Uncle Jin Bing about building a few small dark rooms and a few school mottos. When everyone knew that the person in front of them was the founder and honorary principal of the school, they didn't dare to say anything and went to accept the punishment honestly. At this time, Master Yi also came over and said to Chen Yi, "I didn't expect that I would finally meet the principal in person after almost a month of school opening." Chen Yi knew that he was in the wrong, but changed the subject and said, "I see that many children now walk to school, so hurry up and buy a few buses for the school." Master Yi replied, "It has been bought, but it will take some time to report to the government." Then Chen Yi pointed to the things found by the school security guards and said, "No, it's okay to have guns, but why can they also find marijuana and grenades? Whose child needs to bring grenades to school for self-defense?" Chen Yi estimated that these things were given by the children's parents. The parents of these children are drug dealers and arms dealers, and they have never thought that there is anything wrong with bringing these to school. Thinking of this, Chen Yi felt unhappy. Master Yi seemed to be used to it. He smiled and comforted him, "It's all going to change slowly. It's already pretty good. This used to be a reserved talent base for gangsters. Arms and drugs were sold here openly. It's already pretty good. Now 90% of the children in Hell's Kitchen have entered this school." Master Yi added, "How many people don't live in the dormitory now? Why do I see so many day students?" Chen Yi asked. "Currently, those who live in the dormitory are either orphans or from poor families. About 50% live in the school, and the rest go home." Master Yi explained. "Change it now. I want all students to live in the school and only go home on weekends. If the gangsters are dissatisfied, let them come to me. I don't see who dares to object," Chen Yi said with gritted teeth. Chen Yi is determined to change all this. If the students are allowed to go home, they will inevitably be corrupted by their gangster parents. Although Chen Yi has dealt with several larger gangs, the remaining. As long as the gangs are not too excessive, Chen Yi will turn a blind eye. At this time, Jin Bing, another principal of Hell's Kitchen, also slowly walked in from the school gate. Seeing Chen Yi's gritting teeth, Jin Bing laughed and patted Chen Yi, who is so blind that he offended our honorary principal on the first day. Let's talk in the office. Then he took Chen Yi to the principal's office. Chen Yi drank a sip of tea and began to ask, "What time does our school usually get out of school now?" Jin Bing looked at Chen Yi in confusion. This is not according to the normal time. School is from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Jin Bing didn't expect that Chen Yi's first question after sitting down was such a basic question. The school time in the whole of America is like this. Does Chen Yi have any objection? Chen Yi looked at Jin Bing's expression and immediately understood his idea, but he did not explain. Instead, he said directly, "I think the children's study time is too short. I think it should be extended to 5 p.m., and then from 6 p.m., let them voluntarily participate in evening self-study until 10 p.m. After all, they have already studied later than ordinary students of the same age. If they don't work hard, they will be wasted." In fact, Chen Yi just couldn't bear to see them so comfortable. Thinking about his previous life, he had to go to school at 6 o'clock every day, read early at 7 o'clock, and was kept in class until 5 o'clock by the teacher. Evening self-study is nothing, and it can't go home until 10 o'clock. In comparison, the students in Hell's Kitchen are too leisurely. Chen Yi is worried that they may get into bad habits in their free time, such as taking drugs, or even playing with dangerous items such as pistols. As for evening self-study, Chen Yi believes that the students will study very consciously when they see the AKs in the hands of the security guards. Since the school cannot effectively manage them, Chen Yi decided to build a prison himself. He wanted to use an iron fist to ensure that students could devote themselves to learning. Jin Bing hesitated. "Anyway, this is your school, you have the final say. But if school ends so late, Vanessa may miss her children more." Chen Yi answered firmly, "Treat everyone equally. Uncle Jin Bing, you don't want your children to not be able to go to college. And I think there are still many places in the school that need to be modified." In this way, Chen Yi and Jin Bing talked about the school reform plan in the office for a whole day. Until Master Yi knocked on the door and interrupted their discussion. He told Chen Yi that a guy named Frank Custer wanted to apply for the school's principal. He also knew that Chen Yi was in the school and hoped to meet him. Chen Yi heard that the name Frank Custer sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was for a while. However, when he heard that this person was actually applying for the school's principal, Chen Yi was still very interested. After all, many parents of children in this school are gangsters. If a bad student complained, he would be retaliated. Of course Chen Yi would not let this happen, but there are still many people who are afraid of being targeted by gangsters, so now Master Yi is the first to take this position. But both Chen Yi and Master Yi know that Master Yi is too intimidating. So Chen Yi decided to meet the man who applied for the job in person. Chen Yi stood up and looked at Jin Bing. Jin Bing stood up and began to organize his things. He glanced at Chen Yi and said lightly, "Don't look at me. People called you by name. I have been with you for a day. I have to go back to see Vanessa, otherwise she will be angry." Chen Yi saw that Uncle Jin Bing was not interested, so he stopped forcing it. He understood that everyone had their own things to do, so he quickly asked Master Yi to lead the way. They walked through the corridor and came to another teacher's office. As soon as he entered another teacher's office, Chen Yi saw a man named Frank Custer. The man's eyes were not full of murderous intent, but numbness, as if he saw everyone as a corpse, and he felt like a numb killing machine. Chen Yi could tell at a glance that this man must have been a mercenary. No wonder this man dared to apply for the position of director of teaching. If any gangster parent dared to trouble him, he would probably be knocked down by this man in a few moves. Just as Chen Yi was about to step forward to introduce himself, Frank Custer suddenly stood up and knelt down in front of him. He kept saying thank you, as if he was grateful to Chen Yi. Chen Yi looked at Master Yi awkwardly and tried to find out what happened. Master Yi also shook his head to indicate that he didn't know. Then Chen Yi quickly helped Frank up, and then asked with concern, "What's wrong with you? Why are you thanking me? I don't remember helping you." Chen Yi was very sure that he had never helped the man in front of him. What could have made a murderer like him give him such a great gift? At this time, if Chen Yi opened the system interface, he would see a series of prompts. Congratulations to the host. Frank Custer has successfully added the host as a friend. Congratulations to the host. Frank Custer's favorability has been increased to 2 stars. Congratulations to the host. Congratulations to the host. Frank Custer's favorability has been increased to full stars. Congratulations to the host. 17/20ths are already family members. Frank stood up. He knew he had lost his composure, and then smiled bitterly and said, "You may not know me, but you should know Monroe, a child who is missing a left arm. He is a student here." After hearing this, Chen Yi looked at Master Yi in confusion. It was a shame that Chen Yi did not know the students in the school. After all, this was his first day at school. Master Yi nodded, and then asked Frank, "Yes, we do have a child named Monroe here, and he did lose his left arm. Who are you to him?" Then Master Yi said to Chen Yi, "This Monroe is also from the same orphanage as you, but he is much younger than you. Later, he joined the Vongola family and was sent here to study now that school has started." Chen Yi nodded as if he had an impression, and then looked at Frank. Could it be that this Monroe is his relative? Frank said to Chen Yi with gratitude, "This Monroe is my poor child. I have inquired about it during this period. If it weren't for you, Monroe might have died long ago." That orphanage. In Frank's eyes, Chen Yi is his god. If it weren't for Chen Yi, he might not have seen his child long ago. If it weren't for Chen Yi, his child wouldn't have been able to grow up safely in Hell's Kitchen and even have a school to go to. When Chen Yi heard Frank say that he was Monroe's father, he immediately said with a cold face, "Oh, you are his father, then what have you been doing all these years? Now you come to pretend to recognize your son. I will not let my students suffer any harm." Chen Yi did not think that Frank was a good person for coming back to recognize his child now. What had he been doing all these years? Frank did not feel any discomfort about Chen Yi's sudden change of attitude. Instead, he understood that Chen Yi was doing it for the good of the children. Frank sat on the stool and said in a low voice, "I used to be an officer in the Marine Corps of this country. I dedicated everything to this country, even my family and life." Frank covered his face and said, "I fought for the country on the front line, but my wife died in a gang fight, and my poor Monroe lost an arm. The federal government concealed everything from me and arranged for me to carry out a 3-year mission. What hurts me most is that the person I once thought was the best, also tried to conceal this matter and tried to prevent me from taking revenge. When I found out about this, I wiped out the entire family of the Italian mafia murderers. The law can't punish them, so I will. Then after a long investigation, I finally found my child here." After hearing all this, Chen Yi was sure that the man in front of him was the anti-hero Punisher of Hell's Kitchen. The Punisher's original name was Frank Custer. He was originally a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. After his family was killed by the underworld, he became the Punisher and retaliated against all evil forces, claiming that, as long as you are guilty, you must die. Master Yi also nodded to show his understanding. If his daughter was also accidentally injured, he would probably make the same choice. Chen Yi had heard about this mafia family annihilation tragedy when he was working part-time. A total of 100 people, including servants, were all killed and stuffed into a grinder. After the incident, it was said that the meat was packed and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. There was no chance for people to be buried. Chen Yi was shocked for a while when he heard this. He didn't expect that the person in front of him was the ruthless man. Chen Yi was more and more satisfied. With Frank as a ruthless man, I wonder who dares not to study in the evening. Then Frank bowed to Chen Yi again. "Thank you, if it weren't for you, Monroe wouldn't be able to live like this now." Although he lost a hand, he didn't feel inferior, and people around him didn't discriminate against him. Chen Yi waved his hand. "I'm not as good as you say. Don't you hate gangs the most? Monroe was thrown into the gangs by me before. Don't you hate me? After all the members of the orphanage were assigned to the Vongola family before. If they didn't join the gangs at that time, there would be no place for these orphans." Frank shook his head. "I know about the Vongola family. The Vongola family is different from ordinary gangs. They are just trying to survive and have never done anything harmful to the world." Frank knew that if it weren't for the Vongola family, his child Monroe might have starved to death right after leaving the orphanage. Although Frank hated the gangs, he did not hate the Von Bulow family. Instead, he was very grateful. And Flock agreed with Chen Yi's idea of building a school for Hell's Kitchen, so he chose to apply. On the one hand, he could see his children, and on the other hand, he could repay Chen Yi for saving his son's life. Chen Yi looked at Frank with admiration in his eyes. He nodded, indicating that he understood Frank's decision. Then he stretched out his hand to shake hands with Frank and said sincerely, "Well, welcome to join, Frank. I hope you can supervise these students well, let them cherish this opportunity and study hard." Frank also stood up and shook hands with Chen Yi. There was a firm light in his eyes, as if he had seen those students gradually moving towards a bright future with the help of Chen Yi and him. "By the way, can you tell me who your friend who betrayed you is? Are you going to take revenge?" Chen Yi seemed to have remembered something and asked. Frank didn't expect Chen Yi to ask this question, but he still answered honestly, "Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D." On the other side of the city, Jin Bing and his wife Vanessa had just finished a pleasant shopping trip and were driving home. The neon lights of the city flickered in the night, and the trees on both sides of the street swayed gently in the breeze. Everything seemed so peaceful and warm. However, this tranquility did not last long. Suddenly, a huge truck rushed into their sight without warning, like a beast out of control, rushing straight towards them without any intention of braking. Jin Bing felt something was wrong and quickly used his superpowers to turn himself into Diamond and lie in front of Vanessa. With a loud bang, the truck hit Jin Bing's car hard. The impact was so great that the driver died on the spot. However, Kingpin's diamond body withstood the impact intact. For a moment, the car was full of flames and smoke. Then a man in black clothes and a black mask jumped out of the truck. This man was the Winter Soldier. He glanced at the car that was smashed beyond recognition, with no expression on his face. In his opinion, such a mission was commonplace for him. The Winter Soldier didn't know that Kingpin had superpowers. He felt that Kingpin and Vanessa, as ordinary people, could not survive this impact, so he made a phone call. "The target of the mission has died, and the mission is completed." On the other end of the conversation, Crossbones roared angrily, "I want to capture them alive, capture them alive. I didn't ask you to kill them." The Winter Soldier hung up the phone nonchalantly. For him, the only option for the mission target was death, and there was no other option. Besides, 30 years ago, he also killed a target with a car. The target was called Stark. The Winter Soldier shook his head, and then turned around and left with peace of mind after watching the car explode. However, he did not realize that this mission was completely different from that 30 years ago. Suddenly, a deafening roar exploded behind the Winter Soldier, making his eardrums buzz. He immediately turned his head reflexively, and the scene in front of him made him dumbfounded and unbelievable. I saw a man with a dazzling body, as if made of diamonds, rushing out of the blazing fire, holding an unconscious woman tightly in his arms. The man called Kingpin, his eyes were full of anger and grief. He gently put Vanessa on the ground, gently comforted Vanessa, then shot his eyes at the Winter Soldier like a knife, and roared, "Do you think I'm easy to bully now that I'm retired? One or two of you want to kill me and my family." His voice was like thunder, shocking. Kingpin was very angry at this moment, and a little fortunate that Chen Yi gave him the shining fruit. If he was still an ordinary person, he might have died this time. If Chen Yi gave him another fruit, maybe Kingpin might be fine, but Vanessa might not be alive. It seems that he has retired recently and is too relaxed. If it were not possible before, this kind of thing would not have happened. The most important thing is that his own Vanessa almost died in front of him once, which made him very angry. The expressionless look of the Winter Soldier for many years finally changed at this moment, and his pupils were shocked. I never expected that Kingpin was also different from what was shown in the intelligence. The intelligence clearly showed that Kingpin was just an ordinary person. At this moment, in a hidden monitoring room, Director Pierce was watching all this through the camera on the Winter Soldier. His face was livid, and he pounded the table angrily, shouting, "What's going on? Why is this Kingpin also a superpower? What is our intelligence department doing?" The intelligence department personnel lowered their heads and dared not breathe. An intelligence officer who didn't know whether to live or die tried to explain. According to previous intelligence, Kingpin is indeed an ordinary person. However, before he finished speaking, Pierce suddenly pulled out a pistol and shot him on the spot. Pierce glanced at the remaining intelligence officers angrily and said coldly, "I don't want to listen to explanations, I only look at the results. If there is a next time, the person in front of you will be your fate. Let the Winter Soldier retreat quickly." His voice was full of coldness and determination. The whole room fell into silence, leaving only the cold voice of Director Pierce echoing in the air. The intelligence officers looked at each other, their hearts filled with fear and uneasiness. "Maybe it's already. It's too late." Crossgu pointed at the screen and said. At this time, Kingpin had turned into a diamond body and rushed towards the Winter Soldier at an astonishing speed. The huge force made the Winter Soldier feel that his internal organs were about to be shaken out. He could not resist this force and could only watch himself being knocked away. The intelligence officers were filled with despair. They knew that if Kingpin really defeated the Winter Soldier, then their mission would be a complete failure. They could not imagine what kind of punishment Director Pierce would give them. The fear made them almost unable to breathe. At this time, the Winter Soldier had been knocked to the ground by Kingpin. He struggled painfully and tried to get himself up. However, Kingpin's power became extremely powerful after he turned into diamond, making the Winter Soldier. "I felt as if my body was about to fall apart." Winter Soldier had mixed feelings. He had long expected that one day he might fail in his mission or even be killed, but he never thought that this day would come so soon. He lay on the cold ground and could only watch Kingpin approach him step by step, his heart full of helplessness and despair. Kingpin walked to Winter Soldier, grabbed his neck and lifted him up. A cruel smile appeared on his face, as if he had seen the fate of Winter Soldier's imminent death. Winter Soldier's eyes were full of unwillingness, but he could not break free from Kingpin's restraints. At the same time, this scene on the screen was seen by Director Pierce. He quickly pointed at Crossbones and said, "Quick, call Winter Soldier. Remember not to reveal our identities." Quote. Although Director Pierce had planned to let Winter Soldier die at the hands of Chen Yi's forces, he couldn't help but feel a little distressed when he saw Winter Soldier was about to be killed. After all, super dead soldiers like Winter Soldier are extremely precious resources. Crossbones was helpless when he heard Director Pierce's order. "You are going to kill someone, and you want people to show mercy. Isn't this a dream?" But his hands did not slow down at all, and he quickly took out his mobile phone and called. At this time, Kingpin was not going to ask who the assassin was, and he just wanted to kill him quickly. Just then the phone rang, and Kingpin took the phone out of Winter Soldier's body. He guessed that it was the call from the person behind Winter Soldier. Kingpin grabbed Winter Soldier's neck with one hand and answered the phone with the other hand. Only the voice of Crossbones came from the other end of the phone. "If I say this is all a misunderstanding, do you believe it? We can make compensation. Please let him go." Quote. The two of them were in a state of panic. "Compensation? I don't need those hypocritical compensations. I only ask him to pay with his life," Kingpin said coldly, with a cruel and cold smile on his lips. Before Crossbones on the other end of the phone could say the next word, Kingpin had already taken action without hesitation. He pinched the Winter Soldier's neck hard, as if he was crushing a tiny insect. Winter Soldier, a soldier who had experienced the test of life and death in World War II, thought he had seen all the death and horror. But he never expected that he would end his life here in this way. His eyes were wide open, full of reluctance and astonishment, as if saying, "How is this possible? You actually killed the Winter Soldier, we will not let you go." Crossbones looked at the scene of the Winter Soldier's death on the screen and made a harsh remark. However, for Kingpin, such a threat was just a deaf ear. He crushed the phone in his hand carelessly, and the fragments of the phone scattered all over the ground, making a crisp sound. Then, he sneered and said, "Winter Soldier, I will go to you personally." After that, he turned around and left without hesitation with Vanessa. Their figures gradually disappeared in the night, leaving only the lifeless body of the Winter Soldier and the fragments of the phone scattered all over the ground. Director Pierce witnessed the whole process on the surveillance screen. Seeing the death of Winter Soldier, an excellent warrior, at the hands of Kingpin, he took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes and ordered, "Go and show Nick Fury the body of Winter Soldier in this video without leaving any trace. We don't need to do the rest." The intelligence officers present thought that Director Pierce was sad about the death of Winter Soldier. They lowered their heads and dared not speak. However, they did not know that Director Pierce was full of joy and expectation at this moment. His hand trembled slightly as he rubbed his eyes, and the corners of his mouth began to rise, as if he had seen that the battle between the Avengers and Chen Yi was about to break out. Crossbones, who heard the order, quickly began to command the people below to start working. The scene was very quiet, and no one dared to speak, for fear of angering the unhappy Director Pierce. The next day, Chen Yi got up early in the morning and learned from Wanda that Uncle Kingpin was attacked and the Winter Soldier died. Chen Yi, who was not fully awake, woke up instantly. This news shocked him. It seems that Captain America's favorability cannot be improved, but Chen Yi does not particularly like Captain America. If they are not on the same path, there is no need to force them to know each other for the sake of the system. At present, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. does not know this news, but it is estimated that it will soon, and they have to prepare to fight with the Avengers. At present, the Avengers only have Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and at most Captain Marvel. There are only a few of the first generation of Avengers. Chen Yi has not seen the Green Fat Man yet, and Thor has not come to the world yet. Such an Avengers is not to be feared. Then Chen Yi sneered. That Pierce is not a good bird. He talked about cooperation with him the day before yesterday, and then he couldn't wait to send people to kill the people around Chen Yi. Chen Yi was not worried that Tony would join the Avengers because Tony was already his family. Even if he joined, Chen Yi would tell Tony who killed his parents, and Chen Yi believed that Tony would immediately quit the Avengers. At this time, Chen Yi did not know that in order to deal with Chen Yi, Nick Fury not only brought in the Fantastic Four, but also spent a lot of money to invite Professor X and his X-Men, as well as the imprisoned Purple Man. Trident building of S.H.I.E.L.D. At this time, Director Nick Fury was taking Tony to visit S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the headquarters of our S.H.I.E.L.D., and your father is also one of the founders here. Nick Fury proudly introduced to Tony. Tony listened to Nick Fury's introduction, nodded mechanically, and then said to Nick, "Hurry up and give me the things my father left behind. I am not interested in anything here. Don't worry, we sincerely invite you to join the Avengers to resist force majeure." Black Egg said slowly. Nick really wants Tony to join. On the one hand, Tony's father is the founder, and on the other hand, Tony is really rich. As long as he joins S.H.I.E.L.D., he can use the name of the Avengers to make money crazily. I'm not interested in joining. What Superboy are you talking about? I just want to take back what my dad left me, Tony said seriously. If Tony hadn't heard the black-boiled egg in front of him say that his dead father had left something for him, he would not have dealt with this person in front of him. Tony, who has seen countless people, can see at a glance that the black-boiled egg in front of him is insidious and cunning and is a difficult politician. I know that you are dying now. As long as you join us, we will have a way to help you solve it. The black-boiled egg looked mysterious, because in his understanding, the small square pile on Iron Man's chest threatened his health all the time. Because the core of the reactor is palladium, it can provide a lot of energy and a lot of toxins. He thought he had grasped Tony's lifeline and looked like he was sure of victory. After hearing what the black-boiled egg said, Tony sneered, "Give me my father's things right now, or I will turn around and leave." Quote, under the nourishment of the magic beans given by Chen Yi, Tony Stark's body has long recovered to its peak state, even healthier than before. Not only that, Chen Yi also generously gave him a new elemental blueprint, which enabled Tony to research more advanced technology. Now, the small square pile on his body is his latest masterpiece, which contains powerful energy and endless possibilities. Therefore, when the black salted egg appeared in front of him and spoke in a threatening tone, Tony only felt that the man in front of him was bluffing. He smiled at the black salted egg, full of confidence in his heart. "Aren't you afraid of death?" The black salted egg's voice was full of doubts and surprise. Tony smiled lightly. "Who told you that I would die? If you curse me again, believe it or not, I will sue you for defamation." Quote. Black Egg frowned after hearing this. He didn't understand where he went wrong. He had clearly found out about Tony's physical condition and knew that he had been seriously injured. But Tony in front of him was so confident, as if everything was under his control. He led Tony into the deepest meeting room, just when Tony was about to lose his patience. Black Egg opened the door of the meeting room, then turned to Tony and said, "Welcome to the Avengers." Quote, Tony saw the Black Widow and Hawkeye he knew before, as well as the Captain America he saw a long time ago in the conference room. In addition, Tony saw several people he didn't know. One of them was a bald man sitting in a wheelchair, with wisdom in his eyes, as if he was a scientist or a wise man. The other was a middle-aged man in a doctor's uniform, who was chatting with the bald man with a gentle smile on his face. What surprised Tony the most was that he saw 3 people wearing the same blue uniforms and a stone man chatting. There was a striking 4 logo on their uniforms, which immediately reminded Tony of the legendary Fantastic Four. In this conference room, everyone exuded a strong aura. They all had different abilities and backgrounds, but they all chose to stand here and work hard for the same goal. Everyone's eyes were focused on the new Tony. Nick Fury felt very satisfied when he saw Tony's shocked expression. God knows how much energy he spent and how much benefit he exchanged to form this alliance. However, seeing that Tony, a playboy who has seen the world, was shocked, Nick Fury felt that it was worth it no matter how hard he worked. Black Egg said to Tony confidently, "Join us, Tony." He believed that with Tony's talent and strength, he would definitely become a great help to the Avengers. Black Egg felt that Tony would definitely agree to the invitation at this time. Tony admitted that he was shocked by the Avengers when he came in, but he soon calmed down. He said, "This is your Superboy team." There was a hint of ridicule and contempt in his tone. Tony ignored the question of the black salted egg, walked towards the American Captain Steve, and said slowly, "I didn't expect that you, an old antique, are still alive." Steve looked at the unruly Tony in front of him and said, "I know your father, Howard, he is a good man." He stretched out his hand to shake hands with Tony, but Tony ignored his hand and continued to move forward. Tony's next target is the bald old man in a wheelchair. He walked up to him and asked with a smile, "I don't know what this gentleman's name is." SHIELD doesn't even let the elderly go now. Although his tone was teasing, his eyes were very serious. He intuitively felt that the person in front of him was the most threatening, and his eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. The bald old man did not answer his question immediately, but looked at him with deep eyes. This look made Tony feel a little uncomfortable, and he felt as if he was seen through. However, he did not retreat, but stared at the other party more firmly. "You can call me Charles or Professor X. Don't worry, I'm just an unarmed old man and I can't pose a threat to you." Charles looked at Tony with a smile, as if he had seen through Tony's mind. Tony understood that the man in front of him was Charles, one of the leaders of the mutants. Hearing that Professor X could see through people's hearts, Tony decided to go back and build a battle armor that could block the prying of the mind. At this moment, the man in blue clothes walked towards Tony and introduced himself. "Hello, my name is Reed Richards, and it's nice to see you again, Mr. Stark." Reed Richards is Mr. Fantastic and the captain of the Fantastic Four. During a space mission, his body structure was changed by cosmic rays, so that his body could change into any shape according to his will. The other members are Invisible Woman, who can be invisible, fly, and emit energy shock waves to create energy shields. The other 2 members are his good friend, the Stone Man, who is extremely strong and tough, and is also the mascot of the Fantastic Four. The other is the Invisible Woman's brother, the Human Torch, whose body can produce flames and fly, and when the body surface temperature is the highest, it is the same as a supernova. Tony glanced at Richards, and Tony's superiority made Richards, a smart man, feel frustrated, but he didn't show it. "I know you, that's the one whose reputation is well known in the investment circle," Tony said. Richards thought Tony was praising her, and was about to be humble when he was interrupted by Tony's next words. "Your project is a loss for every investment, which is simply a nightmare in our circle. In my opinion, any project in my mind can make a lot of money. How do you make every project lose money? In a sense, you are also a genius," Tony teased. A real villain like Tony looked down on hypocrites like Richards. He thought that although Richards was smart, he didn't use the right path, but used the crooked path. When Richards heard Tony's sarcasm, the smile on Richards' face froze, but he couldn't show his face as he always maintained a gentlemanly image, but he was already thinking about how to make Tony suffer. The hot-tempered Human Torch heard Tony mocking his teammates, and his whole body was on fire and he was about to cause trouble for Tony. But he was immediately stopped by his sister Susan, the Invisible Woman, with a look at him. Wow, 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 may I ask this young man with a body full of fire. Captain America is your father. Tony immediately started to tease the Human Torch again. It's no wonder he said that. The main reason is that the Human Torch looks exactly like Steve. This sentence also directly angered the Invisible Woman Susan. She didn't expect Tony to be so rude. And the always gentle Steve also glared at Tony. He couldn't stand Tony's insult to his teammates. The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became tense and full of gunpowder. Enough, Tony, answer me, do you want to join or not? Nick Fury finally spoke this time. Tony immediately refused. I refuse, I am not interested in joining your Superboy. Remember to send me my father's things. Quote. Then Tony immediately left the Avengers meeting room. The reason why Tony refused so straightforwardly was because he had already realized that the first target of the Avengers formed by Black Sauce Egg was definitely Chen Yi from Hell's Kitchen. Tony himself did not realize that his heart had unconsciously leaned towards Chen Yi's camp. At this moment, Tony began to think about whether Chen Yi's camp could beat the Avengers. Ordinary people like Hawkeye and Natasha were not to be feared, and Chen Yi's killers could handle it. Then there were the Fantastic Four. Tony said that he would come to deal with Mr. Fantastic. Tony didn't know why he hated Mr. Fantastic in his heart. Others just leave a few to Deadpool and the little girl next to Chen Yi. In Tony's mind, he has simulated such battle scenes countless times, and the result is always that Chen Yi's side wins. This made him feel relieved a little, as if he saw the dawn of victory. However, what Tony didn't know was that there was a more powerful force hidden in the Avengers, Captain Marvel. Tony was about to tell Chen Yi about the news of the Avengers when he saw Chen Yi calling him. Hey, Chen Yi, I just wanted to find you, Tony said. Chen Yi on the other end of the phone said in surprise, what a coincidence, I just wanted to find you, and I want to tell you a good news and a bad news. Tony hated the Riddler the most, and was also curious about what good news Chen Yi would have about him. Tell me what the good news is. On the other end of the phone, Chen Yi's tone suddenly became serious. The good news is that I found the murderer who killed your parents. Quote. Tony's heart skipped a beat, and he could hardly hold the phone steady. He widened his eyes, his voice full of shock. How is it possible? My parents didn't die in a car accident. This news was too shocking for Tony. He had always believed that his parents died in an ordinary car accident. If what Chen Yi said was true, it meant that he had let the real murderer get away with it for more than 20 years, and he himself knew nothing about it. Tony was eager to know more details. He felt that he needed more information to digest this shocking news. He decided to go to Chen Yi in person. Face-to-face conversation would be clearer than on the phone. Tony took a deep breath, and then said like squeezing toothpaste, wait for me, I'll be there soon. Then he hung up the phone. Soon, Tony came to Chen Yi's restaurant in Hell's Kitchen. Tony, anxious to know the truth, ignored John Wick's greeting and rushed into the restaurant. John Wick put down his hand to greet him. He didn't expect to see Tony so anxious one day. Maybe Tony had something urgent to find Chen Yi. If it was Pietro, he might have followed him in curiously. But John Wick himself was not such a gossipy person, so he didn't care and continued to sit in a daze. As soon as Tony entered the room, he slapped Chen Yi's desk and asked, what happened? Didn't my parents die in a car accident? Chen Yi was drinking tea calmly at this time. He looked up at Tony, who looked anxious, and said, take off your armor quickly, don't step on my floor. Chen Yi didn't know what Tony was anxious about. After all, this matter had happened for so long, and he didn't refuse to say it, but he had to fly over to tell him in person. Chen Yi thought that Tony in his previous life knew the truth but didn't kill the Winter Soldier. Now Uncle Kingpin has killed the Winter Soldier, and Tony still has to thank him. Tony looked at Chen Yi, who was drinking tea calmly there, and at this time he wanted to put a gun on Chen Yi's head and let him tell it quickly. Didn't I tell you that I found the murderer who killed your parents? Ask Jarvis to check it out. I remember there is a video in S.H.I.E.L.D. that records the death of your parents. Chen Yi said. After hearing what Chen Yi said, Tony was about to rush home to find Jarvis to check the evidence. He couldn't wait to know the truth. If it was true, he swore to make the murderer pay the price. Chen Yi saw that Tony was about to rush away again, so Chen Yi quickly stopped him and said, wait a minute, didn't I say there was another bad news for you? Tony paused, and he turned his head, his eyes full of doubts and confusion. He looked at Chen Yi, as if asking, is there any worse news than knowing the truth about my parents' murder? Chen Yi saw this and said directly, the murderer who killed your parents has been killed by Uncle Jin Bing. He wanted to kill Uncle Jin Bing and his wife the same way he killed your parents yesterday, but he was killed in return. Hearing this news, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then an inexplicable sense of loss surged into his heart. He felt that his anger and impulse were like a flame that was suddenly extinguished, and it was extinguished in an instant. The murderer he was looking for was actually dead. His anger and impulse seemed to have lost their target. Then Tony looked at Chen Yi in confusion, wanting to know the whole incident. So Chen Yi began to tell the whole incident in detail, starting from the attack of Kingpin's family by Winter Soldier, to the revelation of Winter Soldier's identity, and then to the truth of his parents' murder. He described every detail as clearly and accurately as possible. After hearing all the truth, Tony looked at Chen Yi with some doubts and shock. He didn't expect the truth of his parents' death to be like this. There was still a trace of doubt in his heart. Before he saw the evidence with his own eyes, Tony would not completely believe the truth of the facts. But Tony also believed that Chen Yi had no need to joke with him. What shocked Tony was that Chen Yi in front of him knew everything that even his own son didn't know, as if there was nothing he didn't know in Chen Yi's world. Tony looked at Chen Yi, his heart full of doubts and shock. He really couldn't understand why Chen Yi knew so much about his parents, things that even his own son didn't know. In Chen Yi's world, it seemed that there was nothing he didn't know, which made Tony feel deeply frustrated. Chen Yi looked at Tony and showed a mysterious smile. How can I tell you that I am a time traveler and know everything? Seeing Chen Yi's annoying smile, Tony was furious, but he suddenly thought of something, which made him feel like getting back at the right time. Tony showed a sly smile and said to Chen Yi, there is one thing you definitely don't know. Chen Yi looked at Tony with curiosity in his eyes. He wanted to know what Tony was going to say. Was there anything else he didn't know? Tony smiled triumphantly, and then said, do you know what I saw in S.H.I.E.L.D. today? Then Tony deliberately kept it a secret. He wanted to see Chen Yi's expectant and curious eyes. Tony wanted to tell Chen Yi what he had done today. The Avengers he saw told Chen Yi that he believed Chen Yi definitely didn't know that Nick Fury had formed the Avengers. Chen Yi instantly understood that Tony was invited by Black Egg to join the Avengers today. Chen Yi knew Tony's temper. He was not convinced and wanted to get back at him. Chen Yi did not show any surprise or curiosity. He just said lightly, Avengers. Tony's pupils dilated instantly. He didn't expect Chen Yi to even know about the Avengers. This made him feel very surprised and frustrated. He felt like a clown in front of Chen Yi. However, Tony did not show it. He stood up and said goodbye to Chen Yi. I have to go back and check the evidence first. If it is true, I will send those who cover up the truth to hell one by one. Avengers base. Nick Fury was chatting with the members of the Avengers at this time. Coulson walked towards Director Fury with a serious face and whispered a few words in his ear. The Avengers did not hear what Coulson said, but saw that Director Fury's face suddenly became serious. At this time, Black Egg heard the news about the death of Bucky, the Winter Soldier, and was still struggling whether to tell Captain America Steve, because it was strange everywhere. Why did Bucky, who had not appeared for many years, suddenly appear, and why did he die as soon as he appeared? Why did the news of death reach S.H.I.E.L.D.? Is there a conspiracy? The Avengers who were doing their own things on the side also felt that something was wrong with Director Fury, and they all stopped what they were doing and looked at Director Fury. Black Egg slowly walked towards Steve. Steve didn't know what was going on at this time, and smiled and said to Fury, why are you suddenly so upset? Is there something wrong? When Steve heard the news about his friend Bucky, the joy in his heart almost overflowed. After all, for someone like him who has been sleeping for decades, all the familiar people around him have left him, and he is trying to adapt to this new world. Suddenly hearing that his good friend Bucky is still alive, Steve's excitement cannot be described in words. He couldn't wait to find Bucky, and didn't notice the solemn expression of Black Egg at all. Steve grabbed Black Egg's shoulder excitedly and asked eagerly, where is Bucky, is he doing well? His eyes flashed with expectation and hope, as if as long as Black Egg said the good news, he could see Bucky immediately. However, Black Egg looked at Steve with excitement, and slowly said, "Steve, calm down, I'm sorry to tell you that Bucky is dead." This sentence was like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering Steve's hope. Steve, who was just happy, heard the news of Bucky's death, and the smile on his face disappeared instantly, replaced by astonishment and pain. He couldn't accept this fact. He couldn't believe that Bucky, who always fought by his side, was gone like this. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Steve's voice was full of pain and despair, and his body was shaking slightly. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.